Chapter 251. Although Qin Huaiyong was appreciated by the emperor, his rank was not high. He could only be regarded as a new noble at most and could not be compared with the old aristocratic families. If such a situation really happened, others would only think that Qin Huaiyong was arrogant and had great ambition but little talent. He dared to challenge Duke Xing's mansion when he just arrived in the capital city. It was really a little too arrogant. He would even be led to the opposite side of the old aristocratic families, which was a disaster for Qin Huaiyong. Since this matter had spread to the extent that even Nanny Dong knew, she knew that Madame of Duke Xing was determined to take Qin Wanru into Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Huaiyong could not say no. Coincidentally, Qi Tianyu came and Qi Baiyu was sitting outside in boredom. She asked Qin Yu to secretly send a note to Qi Baiyu and asked him to lead Qi Tianyu to her father's study. "Miss, what does Madame of Duke Xing want to do to you?" Seeing Qin Wanru was silent, Yu Jie became more anxious. She thought it over and over again and still could not understand why Madame of Duke Xing treated Miss like this. Miss and Madame of Duke Xing had never met before. "Do we need to plead with the and Great Elder Princess?" And Great Elder Princess has always been at odds with Duke Xing's mansion. It is not good for her to intervene in this matter. Qin Wanru shook her head and directly denied. "Then what should we do? Is Miss really going to be Madame of Duke Xing's daughter?" Yu Jie was so anxious that her eyes were about to turn red. Madame of Duke Xing obviously has a bad intention to Mississippi. If she really enters Duke Xing's mansion in such a name, what will happen at that time will depend on her words. Everyone knew that once a noble family like Duke Xing's mansion entered, it would be as deep as the sea, let alone Duke Xing's mansion. If she really entered, it would be difficult to get out. With the status of Madame of Duke Xing, even if she intervened in Qin Wanru's marriage, no one would say no. They even thought it was Qin Wanru's honor. Let's see what Qi Tianyu will say when he comes out. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, looked at the door of the study, and said meaningfully, "She deliberately went to her father's study just now." Of course, it was not a real chance encounter. In the study, Qin Huaiyong's eyes fell on Qi Tianyu. His eyes were full of pity. Compared to Di Yan, Qi Tianyu, who was handsome and imposing, was much better. Even though his status in the capital city was not prominent, his temperament and his ability to judge people were not something Di Yan could compare with. Madame Di herself was useless, and her judgment of people was so poor that she couldn't tell the difference between pearls and jades. "How have you been recently?" He put down the file in his hand. From Qi Tianyu's point of view, he saw the words, Duke Xing's mansion, and his heart involuntarily moved. "Thank you for your concern, uncle. I'm doing well. There are only me and my second brother in the mansion. It's quiet and I can study." Qi Tianyu replied with a smile. "That's good. What do you think?" Qin Huaiyong nodded and asked with a smile. "Almost, but sometimes I'm still a little confused. I don't know what kind of literature people like in the capital city." Since Qin Huaiyong asked, Qi Tianyu answered without any grudge. He smiled gently and didn't get angry with Qin Huaiyong because of Qin Yuru. His attitude was as respectful as ever, and he still treated Qin Huaiyong as an elder. This made Qin Huaiyong have a good impression of him. He sighed again and said sincerely, "Nephew, don't just read books. Go out and have a look. Maybe the articles you write will be more in line with the taste of the capital city. Although I will help you to inquire about it, it's inappropriate for a general to be too close to civil officials. If civil and military officials were too close, it would arouse the emperor's suspicion. Especially those who could judge people's articles, they must not be ordinary civil officials." Although Qin Huaiyong had just arrived in the capital city, he still knew this. Even if he wanted to help Qi Tianyu, he couldn't find a good way to break through. This was not an excuse. He really felt that he owed Qi Tianyu for the matter of Qin Yuru. "Uncle, I fully understand your feelings for me. Uncle, you don't have to inquire about it for me. It's not good to make friends with important civil officials when you just arrived in the capital city. If I'm lucky enough to be selected one day, someone will suspect you. Uncle, you've just arrived in the capital city, and your foundation is not stable yet. You should be safe." Qi Tianyu said with a smile. His eyes slid over the file, and his face became more and more respectful. Tianyu. Plus, Yuru doesn't deserve you. Qin Huaiyong sighed deeply and blurted out this sentence. It was not easy to find a son-in-law who was so sensible and could see the situation clearly. If Qin Huaiyong could get him, it would be a great help to him. Maybe he was not as good as Di Yan now, but it was hard to say in the future. Don't bully a poor young man. Uncle, you're too polite. First Miss and I are not destined to be together. Qi Tianyu said with a sense of loss. Although his smile was still very peaceful, a touch of sadness could be seen in his eyes. After all, the matter of Qin Yuru hurt him. Although he still respected Qin Huaiyong and had no resentment, it could not erase the sadness in his heart. The affection of childhood sweethearts could not be erased easily. It was good enough that Qi Tianyu did not hate Qin Yuru. Moreover, there were so many rumors outside recently. It was said that Qi Tianyu did not say anything bad about Qin Yuru, which moved Qin Huaiyong more and more. If I had, Qin Huaiyong said with guilt. Uncle, you don't have to say it. I know it's useless to think about it now. Don't worry, Uncle. I have always been grateful to Qin's mansion. The two misses of your mansion grew up with me. Even in the future, I will treat them as always. Qi Tianyu interrupted Qin Huaiyong this time and raised his head to say seriously. This made Qin Huaiyong more and more sad. If Madame Di and Yuru had not been so calculative, the current situation would be completely different. Also, they would not be in such a mess. Even this marriage had to be saved by his threat. Both Qin Huaiyong and Di Yan's reputation would be ruined. Thinking of this, his heart inexplicably moved. In addition to Qin Yuru, he also had Qin Wanru, his daughter. Thinking of this, he was immediately happy. His eyes fell on Qi Tianyu and looked him up and down. He nodded secretly. He had always been optimistic about Qi Tianyu. If Qi Tianyu could pass this exam, he would immediately marry Wanru to Qi Tianyu. Based on the friendship between the two families, Qi's mansion would definitely agree. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on his face, and his attitude became more amiable, but he didn't reveal anything. Although he saw Qi Tianyu, he still had to think about it before he passed the exam. Uncle, I want to learn martial arts. Qi Baiyu stood up and said to Qin Huaiyong. You want to learn martial arts? Qin Huaiyong turned his eyes to Qi Baiyu and said with a smile. He knew that Qi Baiyu always loved martial arts. Magistrate Qi's two sons, one was a scholar and the other was a martial artist. They complemented each other. Thinking of this, Qin Huaiyong immediately thought that he had no children and could not help feeling a little sad. Yes, Uncle, I want to learn martial arts. Can you help me find a teacher to teach me? Qi Baiyu took 2 steps forward and said hurriedly. He was young, so he was more open in front of Qin Huaiyong. When he was in Jiangzhou, he climbed over the wall of Ningyuan Army General's yard more than once and was caught by Qin Huaiyong several times. Knowing that Qin Huaiyong was a naughty boy, of course, he laughed. Okay, I'll go back and see if there is a good teacher. I can ask him to come to your mansion to teach you. But you have to learn well. Don't climb over other people's walls. Qi Baiyu's face turned red. He reached out to scratch his head and laughed. Uncle, you are really funny. I'm so old now. How can I still do this kind of thing? I remember that when we were in Jiangzhou, you climbed over the wall of my mansion several times. It doesn't seem to be a long time ago. Qin Huaiyong also relaxed and smiled. He leaned back and talked to Qi Baiyu. Uncle. Qi Baiyu's face became redder and redder. He stamped his feet hard. The young boy looked annoyed and embarrassed, which made Qin Huaiyong and Qi Tianyu in the study laugh together. Qi Tianyu also stood up from his seat and walked to the desk. He smiled and bowed to Qin Huaiyong respectfully. He said, Uncle, please take care of me. My second brother wants to learn martial arts. He said he doesn't want to study anymore. My father also asked him to do that. When we were in Jiangzhou, we also hired a martial arts teacher to teach him. But I'm not familiar with this place, so I don't know who to ask. It's not a trouble. Our families have been friends for generations. Now that your father is not in the capital city, I will take care of you. You don't need to be so polite. Qin Huaiyong waved his hand and said, Thank you. Then we won't disturb you any longer. We'll leave now. Qi Tianyu took a step back and bowed to Qin Huaiyong with Qi Baiyu. Looking at the pair of brothers in front of him, Qin Huaiyong sighed with emotion again. Although they looked different, they were both extraordinary. After saying a few polite words, Qin Huaiyong let them leave. No one noticed that when Qi Tianyu approached the desk, he had already seen the file on the desk clearly. Qin Huaiyong had been reading it before. When he saw them come in, he half-closed the file. The words, Duke Xing's mansion, were clearly written on the cover. As for the half-closed file, there was also the words, Madam of Duke Xing. It was obvious that these words were related to Duke Xing's mansion and Madam of Duke Xing. Did Qin's mansion really want to have a marriage alliance with Duke Xing's mansion? Qi Tianyu and Qi Baiyu walked to the gate of the courtyard quietly. But Qi Tianyu didn't hurry to leave. He stopped, narrowed his eyes and reached out to gently flick his sleeves. A trace of sadness flashed across his eyes. He had thought that Qi Rongji was exaggerating and didn't trust her. But now when he saw the file on Qin Huaiyong's desk, he took it seriously. Brother, what's wrong? Qi Baiyu looked sideways and asked. Chapter 252. Let's go back. Qin Wanru said after seeing Qi Tianyu and Qi Baiyu leave. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth. It seemed that she had successfully aroused Qi Tianyu's attention. With Qi Rongji's character, Qi Tianyu might not care much about what she said, but now seeing the case file of Duke Xing's mansion in her father's room, it must have aroused his interest. When Qi Tianyu was thinking, he would stop and flick his sleeves. This was his habit or subconscious action, but Qin Wanru saw it clearly. If Qi Tianyu didn't have any idea, he would not stop and think as soon as he walked out of Qin Huaiyong's yard. She deliberately sent the case file of Duke Xing's mansion to her father's desk to let Qi Tianyu pay attention to this matter and help Qi Rongji get the identity of the adopted daughter. With Qi Rongji's character, it was difficult for her to get the identity of the adopted daughter, but it would be different if Qi Tianyu helped. She just had some guesses about some things. In her last life, she always stayed in the backyard. Even when she entered the palace because of the painting, she always stayed in the room and rarely went out, so she couldn't get any information. Moreover, some memories had been blurred since she was reborn. If her guess was right, Qi Tianyu might have had someone behind him, otherwise Qi Tianyu couldn't stir up a pool of muddy water. As expected, in the next few days, there were more and more rumors, not only about Madame D and Qin Yuru, but also about Qin Wanru. There was even a rumor that Qin Wanru was not Qin Huaiyong's biological daughter. It was said that she was the posthumous daughter of a deputy general. It was also said that someone could prove that although the deputy general died at that time, his wife was looking for this girl. At first, everyone thought it was a joke, because it was just a rumor about Ningyuan army general's vicious legal wife and eldest daughter. However, in a few days the rumor became more and more true, and even the rumor about Madame D was suppressed. Some people also said that they saw this madam with their own eyes. She was also the widow of a general. She was now on her way to the capital city. It was said that she found Jiangzhou and went to Ningyuan army general's mansion. However, Ningyuan army general's mansion was empty. Hearing that Ningyuan army general had gone to the capital city, this madam came to the capital city. This news was spread by a few traveling merchants, and they spread it with their noses and eyes. Many people had not forgotten the rebellion a few years ago. At that time, many people had died. There was even a time when the rebel army was even more powerful than before. Some cities were breached one after another, and many people died in the chaos of war. Among them, there was no lack of officials like deputy generals. Some of them were even appointed in the face of danger. They did not even have time to be examined before they directly went into battle. In the end, only their names were left behind when they died. It was extremely difficult to find out the truth. In that rebellion, Qin Huaiyong was only a deputy general, but in the end he stood out. On one hand, it was because he was indeed outstanding, but on the other hand, it was because his general and some of his deputies had all died, leaving him as a high-ranking military general. Qin Wanru's origin was originally uncertain and many people didn't believe it. However, because of the background of this rebellion, coupled with the repeated affirmation of some people, the more it spread, the more people felt it was true, and the more versions spread. Some people said that Qin Wanru was an orphan. Her father was an ordinary soldier in the army, and her mother was a washerwoman in the army. Both of her parents died, and Qin Huaiyong took her in because he felt sorry for her. Others said that Qin Wanru's father was also a famous general. Before he died, he entrusted Qin Wanru to Qin Huaiyong. After that, he went to the battlefield and never came back, and her mother was also lost in the chaos of war. Some people said that Qin Wanru was a miss from an aristocratic family in the capital city. An aristocratic family was now looking for this miss, but they couldn't confirm her identity at the moment, so they wanted to recognize this aristocratic family as their adopted daughter. There were all kinds of rumors, and people didn't know which one was true. But no matter what, one thing was sure, that Qin Wanru should not be the biological daughter of Ningyuan army general. Otherwise, there would not be so many rumors. Moreover, there was a rumor that second Miss Ning's biological mother was not in Ningyuan army general's mansion. Among the two wives of Ningyuan army general, one was Madame D, who was vicious and wanted to kill second Miss Qin. Even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. Of course, she could not be the biological mother. As for the other one, Qin Huaiyong married in order to take care of second Miss Qin. Of course, she could not be the biological mother of this child. Moreover, there was a servant woman who had worked in Ningyuan army general's mansion in Jiangzhou. Now she was transferred to the capital city. She also repeatedly said that all of Qin Huaiyong's concubines were still alive, and second Miss Qin could not be the biological daughter of a dead concubine. Moreover, when second Miss Qin appeared in Qin's mansion, she was already a child, and did not grow up in Qin's mansion. What this servant woman said was the most true. It was said that someone had investigated and found that she was indeed a servant of Ningyuan army general's mansion in Jiangzhou. It was unknown how she came to the capital city and happened to catch up with this topic. Of course, others believed this, but Qin Wanru didn't believe it. How could a servant woman come to the capital city from thousands of miles away, and happen to catch up with this wave of rumors? As soon as she heard this rumor, she knew that this person was released by Qi Tianyu. Of course, some of these rumors were also released by Qin Wanru herself. This was the effect she wanted. True and false, false and true, so that people could not distinguish them at all. These rumors were spread to Duke Xing's mansion and Madame of Duke Xing. At first, Madame of Duke Xing didn't care about it, but as more and more rumors spread and became more and more unbelievable, Madame of Duke Xing figured it out in her room and was so angry that she kicked over her table. Things changed so fast that she couldn't respond at all. "Madam, please calm down." Nanny Xing immediately asked her servants to leave and persuaded her in a low voice. She had never seen Madame of Duke Xing so angry that she forgot herself. No matter in front of others or behind others, Madame of Duke Xing had always been a dignified and decent madam of a noble family. When would she do such a rude thing? Where did these rumors come from? Madame of Duke Xing asked with a sneer. "I can't find out. It seems that many people are talking about this second Miss Qin overnight. But because everyone paid attention to Qin's mansion before, it is not surprising that they talked about this second Miss Qin. Originally, Madame D, the wife of Ningyuan army general, wanted to plot against this second Miss Qin, and there is the testimony of the wife of Duke Yangxu's heir." Nanny Xing said cautiously. Madame of Duke Xing lowered her head and kept silent for a while. Suddenly she raised her head abruptly and asked, "Is there any evidence that Ningyuan army general's mansion did it?" "This can't be proved. All the rumors, madam, are not good for Ningyuan army general's mansion. If second Miss Qin is not the biological daughter of Ningyuan army general, her status is far lower than that of a biological daughter. Since Ningyuan army general has kept this secret for so many years, he must intend to raise second Miss Qin as his biological daughter and will not take the initiative to reveal it." Nanny Xing said in confusion. "Is it that bitch Madame D who ruined my plan?" Madame of Duke Xing couldn't hold back her anger and said coldly, "I don't think so. Isn't Madame D locked up now? Even if she wants to stir up trouble, she can't," Nanny Xing said. "Speaking of this, she is the only one who can benefit from it. She may want to drive Qin Wanru away from Ningyuan army general's mansion and find a reason to explain her previous behavior." "What an ignorant fool!" Madame of Duke Xing scolded coldly. Although she knew that Madame D was unlikely to be the culprit, She was so angry that she couldn't find a place to vent her anger, so she vented all her anger on Madame D. Have you found those people? I asked someone to keep an eye on Ningyuan Army General's mansion and found that the supervisor of the mansion secretly brought a few people back a few days ago. They haven't come out until now. Nanny Sheng said flatteringly. Although they didn't get Madame D's letter before, they still found those people because of the actions of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. But now these people had entered Ningyuan Army General's mansion. No matter how powerful Madame of Duke Xing was, she couldn't reach into Ningyuan Army General's mansion now. What a useless fool. What have you done before? You said that you should wait for the most suitable opportunity to let these people ruin Madame Shui's reputation. Now, even the people are gone. With Qin Huayong's means, it is impossible for these people to say anything wrong about Madame Shui. No wonder they are locked up now. They are really useless. Madame of Duke Xing sneered. Madame D is indeed a little stupid. Otherwise, she wouldn't have. Nanny Sheng said meaningfully. She didn't finish her words, but Madame of Duke Xing understood it. She sneered and didn't say anything more. After thinking for a while, she changed the topic. Where did the most mysterious sentence come from? Which sentence? Nanny Sheng had just told Madame of Duke Xing all the rumors outside. But this time the topic changed so quickly that she couldn't change it for a while, so she asked subconsciously. After asking, she realized that it was inappropriate. She hurriedly lowered her head and said in a panic, "This? I don't know. I asked someone to check it, but like all the rumors, I don't know where it came from. But there is one thing I can prove. It has nothing to do with Ningyuan Army General's mansion. It can't be spread by someone in Ningyuan Army General's mansion." Her words made Madame of Duke Xing silent for a while. Her face became colder and colder. After thinking for a while, she was about to say something. Suddenly she heard a servant girl outside saying loudly, "Duke! Duke! Duke!" Then more servants greeted them. Madame of Duke Xing glanced at Nanny Sheng. Nanny Sheng understood. She hurriedly walked to the door, opened the slightly closed door, and slightly lifted the curtain. As soon as she lifted the curtain, she saw the round and fat Duke Xing walk in with his hands clasped behind his back with a serious face. After he came in, Nanny Sheng put down the curtain in her hands and bowed to Duke Xing. Duke Xing ignored her, strode in, and sat down in the chair beside Madame of Duke Xing. The serious look on his face became gloomy, which was completely different from how he looked in front of others. Others only knew that Duke Xing was a kind fat man. He was kind to everyone and seemed to have a good temper. He and Madame of Duke Xing were dignified and decent. They could be said to be a model couple in aristocratic families and could be regarded as a couple with a very good reputation. But at the moment, they both looked gloomy. Duke Xing waved his hand, and Nanny Sheng left silently. She carefully closed the door for them and took 2 steps back to guard outside the door. Chapter 253. It has been said that I will take her as my daughter. How can I stop it? Madame of Duke Xing's body shook, and her beautiful face showed irrepressible anger. In order to create more pressure on Qin's mansion, she deliberately visited many powerful madames with various reasons the next day. Although she didn't explicitly say that she would accept Qin Wanru as her adopted daughter, she did implicitly express that she would accept an adopted daughter. She had also visited Qin Wanru before and was very satisfied with her. She also expressed that she valued this adopted daughter very much. After recognizing her as a relative, she would be brought to Duke Xing's mansion to be raised. Of course, she didn't say it out loud to show her self-restraint. Before the matter was officially concluded, of course, she couldn't casually say it out loud. You still want to acknowledge her? Does that mean that the rumor is true? Duke Xing said coldly with an increasingly cold look. He raised his heavy eyelids, looked at Madame of Duke Xing and stood up. That's it. After saying that, he lifted his leg and was about to leave. I can't do this. What will others think of me? I will become a joke in the whole circle of madames of aristocratic families. Madame of Duke Xing also stood up and said discontentedly. Her words could be said with certainty, and she almost directly named Qin Wanru. If she flinched at this time, she would only be laughed at by those madames, and she would also be laughed at. Madame of Duke Xing could not afford to lose face. If I don't do this, what else do you want? Duke Xing said unhappily, with a faint light flashing in his eyes, which was unclear. There is more than one maid in Qin's mansion. Does Qin Huaiyong have another maid? Madame of Duke Xing said after a moment of silence. Even if she couldn't accept Qin Wanru, she had to accept one. She didn't want to be a joke in the circle of madams of aristocratic families. If she could talk nonsense about such a thing, who would believe her in the future? Moreover, this kind of quarrel was something that misses of aristocratic families had been forbidden since they were young, which was not in line with Madame of Duke Xing's previous image of a lady from a respectable family. This would affect Madame of Duke Xing's image. Don't tell me you want to adopt Qin Huaiyong's infamous eldest daughter? Our Duke Xing's mansion will not accept such a person with a bad reputation. Duke Xing refused directly. What should I do? I can't be so shameful. Madame of Duke Xing was stunned for a moment and said discontentedly, Are you trying to attract attention? Duke Xing looked at Madame of Duke Xing sharply, and Madame of Duke Xing had to lower her head. Let's just forget about it. Don't mention it again. In addition to the Qin sisters, there is another person living in the Qin's mansion. She is the daughter of the magistrate of Jiangzhou. I recognize her. Seeing that Duke Xing was about to leave, Madame of Duke Xing also became anxious and said loudly. Duke Xing paused and said without looking back, It's up to you. After he finished speaking, he lifted the curtain, pushed open the door, and walked out of the room. His face had returned to its usual calmness, but the servants in the courtyard all held their breath, not daring to make a sound. Nanny Sheng looked at the black shoes standing in front of her and did not dare to move. You are Madame's confidant. In the future, you still have to persuade Madame. You can't be as frivolous as that day. Duke Xing said gently. Yes, High Duke, I understand. Nanny Sheng understood what Duke Xing was talking about. She shivered more and more, and her whole back was bent. That's good. Madame doesn't understand some things very well, but you are different. You used to watch me grow up, and I have always respected you. So you should persuade Madame, lest she does something unrealistic. Duke Xing became more and more gentle. Everyone in the courtyard knew that Nanny Sheng's identity was not simple. Although she was Madame of Duke Xing's trusted subordinate, she was not brought by Madame from her maiden home, but Duke Xing's wet nurse. This identity was a deterrent to the people in the courtyard, and also to Madame of Duke Xing. Yes, High Duke, I understand. Nanny Xing did not mean to take advantage of her seniority at all, and she looked more and more respectful. Duke Xing glanced at Nanny Xing, smiled, and walked out very politely. His round smile was very much in line with his image as a fatty. After he left the courtyard, Nanny Xing gently knocked on the door. Come in. Madame of Duke Xing's somewhat cold voice came from the room. Obviously, she had not recovered yet. Compared with Duke Xing, who had changed his look as soon as he went out, Madame of Duke Xing's mood adjusted much slower. When Nanny Xing entered the room, she found that although Madame of Duke Xing's face was still very pale, she was not as gloomy as before, and her expression was not bad. Go to prepare the 4 gifts and accept the girl from Qi's mansion as your adopted daughter. Madame of Duke Xing looked at the teacup on the table and said slowly. She was not in a hurry, so it was obvious that she had really made this decision instead of being impulsive. Madam, do you really want to accept Miss Qi as your adopted daughter? Nanny Sheng was stunned for a moment, and hurriedly raised her head and asked. If we don't do this, how can we end this matter? Now we can only take one step at a time. It doesn't matter if there are more or less people in our mansion, so it's okay to accept an adopted daughter. It's just a matter of putting on some dowry. It's not a big deal. Madame of Duke Xing said coldly. There was a flash of anger in her eyes. She still didn't know who was behind all this. If she knew who it was, she would definitely cut that person into pieces. It was such a good move, but because of these rumors, she had to restrain herself. She even took in Qi Rongji, who didn't know what she was doing, into her team. Since she saw Qi Rongji, she had deeply disliked her. She was just a greedy and vain woman who wanted to curry favor with her. Madame of Duke Xing had seen many such women, so she was really not interested in them. But now, she could only do this. It's good that Madam can think in this way. I originally wanted to persuade Madam to change someone else. Since Miss Chi lives in Chin's mansion, it makes sense that Madam went to Chin's mansion before. Although Miss Chi is not good, at least her reputation is not stained. She can be raised in our mansion. Nanny Sheng thought for a moment and told the truth. After saying this, she was afraid that Madam of Duke Xing couldn't understand, so she lowered her voice and said implicitly, "Just now, Duke asked me to persuade Madam more. He said that Madam might be wrong about something. It would be better if she didn't say this." As soon as she said this, Madam of Duke Xing's eyes and brows became fierce. She sneered again and again. What does he mean? Wrong? Isn't he talking about that set of plates? It was originally a good thing. But who knows that Madame D and Countess Yong are so hopeless that they can't even handle such a small matter. Speaking of this, Madame of Duke Xing was also full of anger. This kind of thing should have been solved in private with everyone knowing it. She didn't really want to punish Qin Wanru, but she just wanted to hold a weakness of Qin's mansion. She could even threaten Madame Dowager and Qin Huaiyong to make her shut up forever. This kind of thing had no impact on Qin Huaiyong's official career. Even if Qin Huaiyong had doubts, he would not do anything. Moreover, she could also offer Qin Huaiyong some other good things. If Qin Huaiyong really swallowed everything, she could even promise to give Qin Huaiyong's only daughter some benefits, so that when she married into Duke Yong's mansion, she would no longer be in a weak position. But now because of Madame D and Countess Yong's hopelessness, this matter actually failed. Not only did it fail, but it also spread to Duke Xing's ears. For this reason, Duke Xing repeatedly reminded her, and even got angry in her room. Every time she thought of this matter, Madame of Duke Xing was so angry that smoke came out of her 7 orifices. It was Madame D and Countess Yong, these two stupid people, who ruined it. Madame of Duke Xing took a deep breath, suppressed the annoyance in her heart and said, "Take that box of beads, give the other 4 gifts to Qi Rongji, and find time to arrange for her to enter Duke Xing's mansion. Find a courtyard for her to live in, and send this box of beads to Qin Wanru." "Madam, that is your favorite pearl, and you said it is for first miss," Nanny Xing exclaimed. "Give it to her first, now she is more important." Madame of Duke Xing sneered and said slowly in a low voice. Now she really took this matter to heart. Originally it was just an idle move. In this case, she just had to pay more attention, and she did not believe that she would fail. Go to Qin Yuru's place to have a look, and also send a pair of earrings. When the news that Madame of Duke Xing wanted to accept Qi Rongji as her adopted daughter spread to Qin's mansion, the whole mansion was shocked, and no one expected the result. That day, Madame of Duke Xing's meaning was very obvious, and she directly refused Qi Rongji. Why did she suddenly change her mind now? Although Madame Dowager was not willing to accept Qin Wanru as the adopted daughter of Duke Xing, she was still very surprised by the current situation, so she specially called Qin Wanru to Xining Pavilion for this reason. She comforted Qin Wanru for a long time, and she was afraid that Qin Wanru would not think it through. After all, she was still a child, and although she was unwilling, she might not be able to accept it because of her face. Qin Wanru herself did not see disappointment at all, and comforted Madame Dowager with a smile, making Madame Dowager beam with joy, and then she came back with Yujia. This matter went so smoothly, which really made Qin Wanru feel a little surprised, but it also made Qin Wanru more and more evidence that there was someone behind Qi Tianyu, and it was a person with real power, who had the strength to fight against Madame of Duke Xing in the capital city, and also made her unable to investigate. In fact, there were not many people like this. In Qin Wanru's mind, she had a vague plan to put all these very suspicious people together. Standing still, looking at the first plum blossom on the branch, she smiled coldly. In the last life, what she saw was what others wanted her to see. The tip of the iceberg, what was slowly revealed in this life was the truth. It was a harsher fact than her death in the waste in the last life. She tore off all the fake veils. In this life, she wanted to see clearly, and she would not die unjustly and inexplicably like in the last life. Second Miss Qin. On the road behind the plum blossom tree, 3 servant girls turned. The first servant girl was obviously a principal servant girl with an extraordinary bearing. When she saw Qin Wanru, she came forward with a smile and bowed to her generously. Chapter 254. Second Miss Qin, I'm from Duke Xing's mansion. This time I come here to arrange for our madam to recognize Miss Qi as her adopted daughter. The principal servant girl smiled gently and politely. Qin Wanru nodded. This servant girl looked familiar. She had come to the mansion with Madam of Duke Xing before. Our madam likes Second Miss very much. Originally, she sincerely wanted to adopt Second Miss as her daughter. Unexpectedly, the rumors were too harsh. Our old madam rebuked our madam and had no choice but to change our madam. Anyway, our madam likes Second Miss the most. Even if they are not destined to be mother and daughter, she asked me to tell Second Miss that if you have any problems in the future, you can tell our madam directly. Our madam will try her best to help. The principal servant girl said eloquently. She said all the words that Madam of Duke Xing ordered in one breath. Then she waved to a servant girl behind her. The servant girl stepped forward and respectfully presented a gift box in her hand to Qin Wanru. I originally wanted to find Second Mississippi. Now I happen to meet you, so I didn't have to walk a few steps. This box of pearls was awarded to our madam by the Empress, but she also allowed our madam to give it as a gift. It can be made into earrings or necklaces. They are all excellent. Originally, our madam specially kept it for our first Mississippi. But this matter, our madam felt quite guilty, so she gave it to Second Miss Qin as an apology. The principal servant girl stepped forward and opened the lid of the box. Immediately, everyone was attracted by the pearls in the box. The pearls were not big or small, and each of them was round. The rarest thing was that these pearls were almost the same size. In this way, they were indeed excellent to be matched with headwear or other accessories. There were a lot of pearls in such a box, and each of them was of top grade. It took a lot of effort to take them out. What was more, it was awarded by the Empress. Of course, it was clear that it could be given to others, which also meant that there was no need to worry about it. This originally belonged to your first Mississippi. I still dare not accept it. Qin Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered. She shook her head with a smile and turned her eyes away from the pearls. Her watery eyes looked very pure and indifferent. She really didn't like these pearls very much. The principal maid had been with Duke Xing for a long time and had seen many misses. Although many of them said no, they behaved very greedily. It was rare to see such a calm and composed miss, so she couldn't help but think highly of Qin Wanru. Second Miss Qin, our madam said that our first miss has a lot of jewelry, and she doesn't like to wear pearls and jade. Second Miss, you are younger than our first miss and you are at the age to dress up. This box of pearls is just right for you. It is a token of our madam's sincerity. Please don't refuse it. The chief maid was very good at talking and smiled. If Qin Wanru still didn't accept it, it meant that she didn't accept Madam of Duke Xing's modesty, which was a bit pretentious. Thank your wife for me. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, and the smile in her eyes became deeper. Her eyes flashed over the hand of another servant girl. The servant girl also had a small gift box in her hand, which was very small. It looked like small jewelry such as hairpins, earrings, and flower pearls. She lowered her head and stood behind the principal maid in a well-behaved manner. Yujia stepped forward and took the box from the servant girl's hand, and then stood behind Qin Wanru. How is First Miss Qi's preparation? Since she had received Madam of Duke Xing's salute, Qin Wanru couldn't completely stay out of it, so she said with a smile. Miss Qi's preparation has been done, but it can be done after our madam is ready. But our madam said that Miss Qi is not alone in the capital city, and there are two brothers. We have to discuss this matter with Miss Qi's two brothers, so we have to get their consent. The principal maid answered with a smile. She meant that Qi Rongji had been ready and was eager to go to Duke Xing's mansion to be a miss, but Duke Xing's mansion was not in a hurry and seemed to take it slowly according to the rules. Is First Miss Qi going to the house of Qi's mansion to wait for the news? Qin Wanru fluttered her long eyelashes and asked curiously. This matter is not urgent. Let's wait for the two childs of Qi's mansion to confirm it first. There are no elders in the house of Qi's mansion in the capital city. Our madam thinks that it is more suitable for First Miss Chi to live in Ningyuan Army General's mansion first. When the matter of recognizing relatives is completed, First Miss Chi will be invited to live in our mansion. The principal maid's answer was very appropriate, and it was obvious that she was well trained. Qin Wanru gently pursed her red lips, and a trace of deepness flashed across her watery eyes. This meant that the matter was gradually settled, and Qi Rongji would live in her mansion for a period of time. Has First Miss Chi said it just now? Qin Wanru calmly turned her eyes to the small gift box left in the hand of the servant girl. Since Madame of Duke Xing wanted to accept Qi Rongji with great fanfare, it was impossible for her to be so embarrassed and send such a small gift box to Qi Rongji. This gift should have been sent out, and if she guessed correctly, this gift box should be for Qin Yuru. Madame D was watched. Although Qin Yuru was grounded before, only she was grounded. Other people could still go in to see her. The first person to send a gift should be Qi Rongji. However, according to Qi Rongji's character, when she saw there were 2 gift boxes, she would definitely inquire about who was sent to and what was sent. It has been sent, and it has been settled with First Miss Chi. During this period of time, we have to trouble Second Miss Qin to take care of First Miss Chi. Our madam is very grateful. The principal maid's attitude was very low, and her words were full of gratitude to Qin Wanru. If Qin Wanru had not secretly intervened in this matter, she would definitely think that this Madame of Duke Xing really liked her. However, due to the formality, she could not accept Qin Wanru as her adopted daughter. However, her intention was the same as that of an adopted daughter, and even more than that of Qi Rongji. In that case, should he express his gratitude as well? Thank you very much, I will. Qin Wanru smiled subtly. Second Miss Qin, I have to trouble you to do one thing. I don't know if it is possible? The principal maid asked with a smile. What's the matter? Qin Wanru said lazily. There is a pair of earrings in this gift box, which is what our madam wants to give to First Miss Qin. However, when I went to see First Miss Qin just now, I found that the people in the yard did not allow me to go in. This time, I came here under the order of our madam. Our madam has sent gifts to the 3 misses in the mansion, but this time the gifts were not sent to First Miss Qin. I am afraid that our madam will blame me, so I want to ask Second Miss Qin for a favor. The principal maid looked embarrassed and looked at Qin Wanru imploringly. This is for big sister? Qin Wanru raised her eyes and seemed to be moved to look at the gift box in the hands of the servant girl. She was such a big box of pearls, while Qin Yuru was just a pair of small earrings. From this point of view, Qin Yuru could not be compared with her. This contrast was really a little strong. Qin Yuru was only grounded before, but after the incident of the map in Nanny Xing's hands, Qin Huaiyong asked people to guard her yard. Although it was not like Madame D, who did not allow anyone to go in and out at will, those who went in must have enough reasons. It was said that Qin Yuru was not allowed to come out before she finished copying the women's precepts and women's rules 100 times. Yes, this is for First Miss Qin by our madam. There are 3 misses in the mansion, but only 2 misses were sent. I am afraid that First Miss Qin will think too much. The principal maid explained. Therefore, this gift was really too small, just to cover Qin Yuru's face. This kind of thing was actually a small matter. Moreover, Madame of Duke Xing had shown great kindness to her before. If Qin Wanru did not help, it would be really unreasonable. Then keep it. I will give it to big sister later. Qin Wanru smiled elegantly. Her elegant smile matched with her watery eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Being stared at, the principal servant girl's heart skipped a beat and she hurriedly lowered her head. But then she also laughed. Even if the second Miss Qin was born smart, how much could an 11-year-old girl who had not experienced anything know? She bowed sideways and respectfully bowed to Qin Wanru. Thank you, second Miss Qin. Another servant girl holding the small gift box came forward. Yujia took the small gift box from the servant girl. Second Miss Qin, then I will go back first. Second Miss Qin, please. The servant girl bowed politely again. Qin Wanru nodded slightly. The principal maid turned and left with the 2 little servant girls. Second Miss, let's go back to our yard first. I will put down the things and then give the gift to First Miss Qin. Yu Jie said after watching several servant girls leave. If not for that box of precious pearls, perhaps the earrings would also be good. But if compared with this box of pearls, the earrings would definitely be less valuable. Qin Yuru had always thought highly of herself and was not the kind of person who could be compared with others. After seeing the earrings, it was hard to say what she would do. Qin Yuru had been very sullen recently. She had no place to vent her anger. She was not willing to go to Qin Wanru at this time. You don't have to go back first. Just go to see Big Sister. After all, we are sisters. As a younger sister, I should send some warmth to Big Sister at this time. Qin Wanru raised her willowy eyebrows and looked at a corner of the plum forest. This plum forest was actually not big. There were only a dozen trees, but there were many plum blossoms. The plum fragrance was bursting. It was an excellent place to appreciate plum blossoms in Qin's mansion. What if first Miss Qin is angry? Yu Jie said worriedly. She could be sure that if she went there like this, she would definitely cause trouble again. So what? In the past, Big Sister often came to me. At this time, shouldn't I have a legitimate reason to see Big Sister? Qin Wanru smiled and looked quite proud. She looked at the big gift box in Yu Jie's hand. She lifted the lid, picked up a pearl inside, and looked at it in the sun. I heard that there is a kind of pearl in the Nan Kingdom. Although it is not big, it is extremely rare. When strung together, it will make the pearl shine and polish, and it can also maintain the color of the face. In the past, Big Sister liked to use pearl powder to moisten her face. If you use this kind of pearl, the color will be more pleasant, right? Qin Wanru smiled more arrogantly. Her delicate little face was proud and complacent at the moment. There was a touch of provocation in her narrowed, watery eyes. At first glance, it was obvious that she was up to no good. Chapter 255. Qi Rongji came out from behind the plum tree. She looked as arrogant as when she was in Jiangzhou. Qin Wanru, I didn't expect that you would deliberately provoke Qin Yuru. You used to be well-behaved, but I didn't expect that you would deliberately provoke Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru understood her pun. She slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and her lips were as beautiful as flowers. First Miss Qi, when will you leave? Her words implied that she wanted to drive Qi Rongji away. She knew that Qi Rongji couldn't help but jump out and come to her door after hearing her words. Qi Rongji was furious, and her eyes fell on Qin Wanru fiercely. Your Qin's mansion is not a good place. Of course, I will leave and I will go far away. In the future, I will be the miss of Duke Xing's mansion, and you are just a bastard picked up. Once you leave, there will be a world of difference. When you see me in the future, you have to bow to me. First Miss Qi, even if you are the real miss of Duke Xing's mansion in the future, as long as we both have no ranks, it seems that I don't have to bow to you, right? Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said lightly. Her words made Qi Rongji blush. Today she was very proud. Her elder brother did help her outside as she asked, and Madame of Duke Xing did send 4 gifts to recognize her as her relative. However, when she saw that the servant girls of Duke Xing's mansion were going to send gifts to the Qin sisters, she couldn't sit still. She followed the servant girl and secretly stared at Qin Wanru. When she saw that the gifts Madame of Duke Xing gave Qin Wanru were much more valuable than hers, she immediately became jealous and had a feeling that her things had been robbed. As for the fact that she robbed the title of adopted daughter, in her opinion, it was originally hers, and Madame of Duke Xing was just temporarily bewitched by Qin Wanru. First Miss Qi, why don't you go to pack up? Maybe Madame of Duke Xing will directly send someone to take you away. Qin Wanru turned around and looked like she didn't want to talk to her anymore. Her contemptuous look made Qi Rongji so angry that her face turned pale. Stop right there, she yelled. Seeing her unforgiving look, Chun-Yi pulled her sleeves suggestively, indicating that she should be careful. After all, this was still the Qin's mansion, and the second Miss Qin in front of her was no longer the second Miss Qin who could be beaten and punished at will. What's the matter? Qin Wanru turned her head and asked coldly. Her indifferent look made Qi Rongji want to give Qin Wanru 2 hard slaps, but she gritted her teeth and endured it. Where's that pair of earrings? I'll take them to Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru didn't say anything and just nodded. Yujia took 2 steps forward and handed over a small gift box. Chun-Yi hurriedly stepped forward to take it and then stepped aside. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, eldest Miss still listened to eldest young master. Since first Miss Chi is willing to give the earrings to big sister, thank you very much. But big sister may not be in a good mood now. If she offends first Miss Chi, I hope first Miss Chi can forgive her. Qin Wanru said indifferently and left slowly with Yujia. She didn't even look at Qi Rongji, and her behavior didn't show any more envy because Qi Rongji was about to become the adopted daughter of Madame of Duke Xing. Lu Rongji felt like punching on cotton. Fake, Qin Wanru's performance must be fake. She must be envious of her and deliberately pretended not to care about her. Go, let's go to see first Miss Qin. She almost said these words while gnashing her teeth. Qin Wanru and Qin Yuru were not good people. Since she couldn't get anything good from Qin Wanru, she would go to Qin Yuru to get it back. For so many years, Qi Rongji had always thought and acted in this way. The difference was that in the past, if she couldn't get anything good from Qin Yuru, then she would go to Qin Wanru to get it back. With such a breath, Qi Rongji went to Qin Yuru's Yalan Pavilion. Unexpectedly, when she arrived at the door of Yalan Pavilion, she was blocked by 2 old maids. First Miss Chi, our first miss is copying calligraphy. She won't see you for the time being. After an old maid came over and saluted, she said politely. Qi Rongji also knew that Qin Yuru was grounded, but she didn't expect that there was someone guarding here. She rolled her eyes and said with a smile, I may leave Qin's mansion. Madame of Duke Xing has recognized me as her adopted daughter. This time I come here to send a gift to first Miss Qin on behalf of Madame of Duke Xing. First Miss Chi, please. The 2 old maids looked at each other, hesitated for a moment, and then stepped back to let her go. Their guarding here was not as strict as Madame D's. Qi Rongji came over to ask them routinely. Since the reason was reasonable, they didn't stop her. Qi Rongji walked inside with Chun-Yi. A servant girl had already seen it and reported it. Seeing her coming, Mei Shui, who served Qin Yuru, appeared at the door with a haggard face and lifted the curtain for her. When she entered the room, she saw Qin Yuru sitting in the room with a gloomy face. The so-called writing was just a few pieces of paper thrown on the desk by the window in a mess, as well as some writing brushes, ink, and other things in disorder. Qin Yuru, how is your writing? Qi Rongji raised her head proudly. What are you doing here? There were no outsiders here, so Qin Yuru said with a bad face. Of course I'm here to see how down and out you are. First Miss Qin, who once charmed my elder brother in Jiangzhou, is now locked up here and can't get out. And your fiancé, who abandoned my elder brother, probably won't even come to see you, right? Qin Yuru, I really feel sorry for you. Qi Rongji sat down on a chair on one side, glanced at the situation in the room proudly, and said sarcastically, What do you mean? Qin Yuru's face was livid, and she stared at Qi Rongji coldly. Now there was no one else here, so they didn't need to pretend to have deep sisterly love. They were both themselves. I really just come to see your miserable situation. Of course, I also want to tell you that I will leave soon. Madame of Duke Xing has decided to recognize me as her adopted daughter, so I will be the miss of Duke Xing's mansion in the future. Qin Yuru, have you ever thought that one day I will step on your head? Qi Rongji patted the dust on her sleeves, which was not there at all, and became more and more complacent. Madame of Duke Xing wants to recognize you as her adopted daughter? Qin Wanru was stunned. She was grounded and not well informed, so she didn't know this. Of course, and she also wants to take me to live in Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Yuru, you wanted to please Madame of Duke Xing at that time, and you were even willing to bully that little child, just to let Madame of Duke Xing look at you more, right? But now, Madame of Duke Xing won't look at you more. Qi Rongji smacked her lips and raised her eyebrows proudly. Her words revealed the embarrassing scene in Qin Yuru's heart, and her face darkened for a moment. Just now, Madame of Duke Xing sent someone to give me a gift to recognize my family, and also a pair of earrings for you. After all, I will also live in your mansion after I come to the capital city. Madame of Duke Xing wants to thank you for me. Qi Rongji leaned back and waved her hand. Chuni came forward and put a very small gift box on the tea table in front of Qin Yuru. Look, it's always Madam of Duke Xing's mood. Since you came to the capital city, you have not been in a good situation. It's rare that my adopted mother thinks highly of you. Qi Rongji even called her adopted mother at this time. Qin Yuru trembled with anger. She swung her hand fiercely, and the gift box was thrown out by her sleeves and fell heavily on the ground. The lid of the box was opened, and a pair of exquisite earrings fell out. You have such a bad temper? What did my elder brother like about you at that time? Qin Yuru, you don't have good looks or manners, and you're so slutty. When you were engaged to my elder brother, you had already hooked up with Child D. You're such an unscrupulous woman. Whoever marries her will be unlucky. Maybe Child D will be surrounded by a green cloud at that time. Without outsiders around, Qi Rongji could be considered to have let go at this time. Her words became more and more unpleasant, and even Chuani who followed her couldn't help blushing. She didn't know where Qi Rongji heard such shameless words in the market. She was a lady from a respectable family, but she dared to say such words. Qi Rongji, don't go too far, Qin Yuru said with a livid face. She suddenly stood up and said sternly, "What? Do you want to hit me? Qin Yuru, I'm warning you. I'm not the daughter of the magistrate of Jiangzhou anymore. I'm the miss of Duke Xing's mansion. This identity is beyond your reach. If you really offend me, I'll ask my adoptive mother to reveal all your scandals in Jiangzhou. Let's see if you still have the face to come out in the future." Qi Rongji was not a person who was willing to suffer losses. She also stood up and shouted loudly. Chuani and Mei Shui saw that the situation was not good, so they pulled them aside one by one, for fear that they would fight again. They would be grounded at most and punished to copy a few words, but the two servant girls would be miserable. They might be scolded and beaten again. Qi Rongji, get out. Qin Yuru suppressed the anger in her heart, stretched out her hand and pointed outside, and said coldly, "Of course I will go, Qin Yuru. Don't think that this is Jiangzhou. This is the capital city. The name of Ningyuan Army General's mansion is not as good as that of Jiangzhou." Qi Rongji snorted coldly, turned around and walked a few steps. Suddenly she stopped, squatted down and picked up the pair of earrings at her feet. She put them in front of her eyes and looked at them. Then she turned back to the tea table beside Qin Yuru and patted the earrings. "Qin Yuru, my adoptive mother gave you earrings, but you don't care about it. Very well, I must tell my adoptive mother about it." Qi Rongji said sharply. "Okay, you say it. Go and tell her now." Qin Yuru trembled with anger. She had always lived a smooth life, and no one could make her so angry. "Humph, you wait and see." Qi Rongji turned around proudly. The earrings were really broken, and one of the beads inlaid on them was loose. She must tell Madam of Duke Xing when there was a chance. First Miss Qi and First Miss really quarreled again. I heard that they quarreled very fiercely, and the old maids guarding outside heard it. Qin Yu reported. Qin Wanru casually picked up a pair of earrings and looked at them. They were a very delicate pair of earrings, very beautiful, and the pearls inlaid on them were also good. But they could not be compared with the pearls given by Madam of Duke Xing. Madam of Duke Xing was really willing to spend the capital. They didn't fight, did they? They didn't fight this time. But after First Miss Qi left, an old maid beside First Miss went to the kitchen to get pastries for First Mississippi. First Miss is really broad-minded. She just quarreled with First Miss Qi, and now she can eat. Qin Yu sighed. She was sent by Qin Wanru to keep an eye on Yalan Pavilion, and then she followed the old maid to the kitchen. Seeing the old maid in the kitchen who took a lot of pastries, she was very speechless. She was tired of quarreling, and now she wanted to eat? Take pastries to eat? Qin Wanru was slightly stunned. She slowly put down the pearls in her hand, and her eyes showed a trace of seriousness. Chapter 256. Yes, she took a lot. First Mrs. behavior is really weird. Qin Yu said in surprise. What kind of pastries did she take? Qin Wanru asked with her eyes darkening. She took some ordinary pastries. She took some of the pastries made in the main kitchen. The old maid said First Miss needed to write and would be hungry soon, So she asked the people in the main kitchen to take some of each kind. Qin Yu thought for a while and said, "Every kind?" Qin Wanru frowned. It seemed that it was not a simple matter. Yes, every kind and a lot of them. Some of them didn't make a lot, so the supervisor of the main kitchen explained it to the old maid. Qin Yu entered the main kitchen later and said that she was cooking bird's nest porridge for Qin Wanru. Because the bird's nest porridge was not ready, she waited in the kitchen for a while. So she listened to the whole thing openly. "What do you mean by some of them didn't make a lot?" Qin Wanru thought for a while and caught the vague meaning in Qin Yu's words. In fact, it's not that there weren't many left. Some of them were First Miss Chi's favorite and the kitchen had sent them to her. There weren't many left. Even if First Miss wanted more, there weren't any left. The supervisor of the kitchen explained it to the old maid beside First Miss. The pastries that Qi Rongji liked? Qin Wanru was shocked. Then what happened? Since there weren't any left, but First Miss said she wanted to eat it, the supervisor of the main kitchen said to make more for First Miss. Qin Yu said, no matter how bad Qin Yuru's reputation was, she was still the first miss of the mansion. Now the rumors outside said that second miss was not the biological daughter of the general, so the only biological daughter was First Mississippi. The servants in the mansion dared not to offend Qin Yuru. Did you make the pastries that Qi Rongji liked? Yes, those. There weren't enough of them, so I specially made some more. Qin Yu said. Qin Wanru nodded and picked up the bird's nest porridge that Qin Yu just brought to her. She ate a few mouthfuls and put down the spoon in her hand. Do I have a bowl of bird's nest porridge in the afternoon? Shui Ruolin was worried that Qin Wanru only ate bird's nest as a supplement. After all, she was still young, so she asked the kitchen to cook some bird's nest porridge for her from time to time. Qin Yu nodded. Bring me a freshly made pastry. Just 1 or 2 pieces will do. She wanted to see what Qin Yuru was up to. It was certain that Qin Yuru was up to no good. However, Qin Yuru liked to shift the blame to others. If there was anyone in the mansion that she wanted to shift the blame to, needless to say, Qin Yuru would definitely be at the top. Yes, miss, I understand. Qin Yu nodded knowingly. While they were talking, Yu Jia lifted the curtain and walked in angrily. Looking at her face, Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing. What's wrong? Yu Jia had gone out for her just now to see how Nanny Dong's shop was prepared. It was obvious that Nanny Dong was angry and came back. Miss, they are talking about our mansion. Yu Jia said angrily. So what? Am I not allowed to talk about it? Qin Wanru said with a smile, not taking it seriously at all. But they are talking about you, miss. Yu Jia looked dissatisfied. She had been with Qin Wanru since she went down the mountain. She was loyal to Qin Wanru and couldn't bear to hear bad things about Qin Wanru. What are you afraid of? The more people talk about it, the better. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to the window and opened it. Immediately, a gust of cold wind rushed in, and Qin Yu couldn't help shivering. Qin Wanru was also very cold and shivered. However, no matter how cold it was, she would not close herself in the corner of the yard like in her previous life, almost isolated from the outside world, unable to hear the voices of people outside, and unable to feel the air outside. Talking about her? Very good, she was worried that the momentum was not enough. It seemed like someone had intervened again. Matters in the capital were no small matter. Even if it was a matter between a man and a woman, it could evolve into a game between several forces. And what he wanted was the result of that game. Miss, don't open the window in this weather. You will catch a cold. Qin Yu came to complain and reached out to close the window for her. More and more people are talking about it. Being blown by the cold wind, Qin Wanru felt a little dizzy, but she was very sober. Touching the bun that was messed up by the cold wind, Qin Wanru turned back and asked with a smile. Yes, it seems to be more than before. Yu Jia pouted and said. On her way, she heard more and more people talking about it. Miss, Madam of Duke Xing has decided to adopt Miss Qi as her daughter. Is there anyone who wants to make trouble? This question made Qin Wanru shake her head. She really didn't know. Even if she vaguely knew some important things in her previous life, she didn't know how many people were involved in it. This kind of thing was far from known by a girl who lived in a boudoir. Don't worry about it. Since it has been spread, let it be spread. Qin Wanru sat in front of the dressing table. Qin Yu skillfully opened her bun that was messed up by the wind and combed it for her again. The girl in the mirror had a face like a hibiscus flower, delicate and beautiful. Her delicate lips and pure eyes made her extraordinarily charming. For a moment, Qin Yu, who was used to seeing Qin Wanru's face, couldn't help but be amazed. Mrs. Face was getting more and more beautiful, and it was getting more and more amazing. When she was in Jiangzhou, although she knew that her miss was beautiful and delicate, compared with First Miss and First Miss Qi, her miss was still a child who hadn't grown up and didn't attract much attention. But now in the capital city, the appearance of First Miss and First Miss Qi couldn't be compared with that of her Mississippi. Miss, this? What will happen if the general hears it? Yu Jie followed her and said worriedly, "If father takes it seriously, let him take it seriously." Qin Wanru said with an ambiguous look. She wanted to know her background very much. Now there happened to be such a rumor, and many people added fuel to the fire behind it. Of course, she hoped that the more people spread it, the better. She wanted to know the truth. If there was no external force, it would be very difficult to get the truth. What happened to Qi Rongji was a good excuse. Qi Tianyu's involvement would make this matter as big as possible. Then, it would not be so difficult for him to find out the original secret. "Miss, you are—" Yu Jie blushed and said with difficulty. This was not something that a servant girl like her should ask. "Whether—" "I don't know." Qin Wanru sighed softly, and her voice was like smoke. "Just wait and see." Since the matter had been spread like this, her father and grandmother would give her an explanation no matter what. And now she was waiting for this explanation to confirm her guess. What happened to those people? Since these things were just guesses, Qin Wanru didn't verify whether it was true or not. She didn't want to talk about it for the time being, so she changed the topic and asked, "Are they the people who were brought back by the general and locked up in the yard over there?" Yu Jie was stunned for a moment, and then she immediately understood and reported with a serious face. "Yes, no one went to see them?" Qin Wanru asked again. "No, Nanny Yu just said that no one went there." Yu Jie shook her head. Although it was Nanny Yu who sent people to keep an eye on this matter, things would be reported to Qin Wanru through Yu Jie from time to time. "Let's go and have a look." Looking at her combed hair in the mirror, Qin Wanru turned her head and said, "Miss, you can't go there. This time they are guarded by the general's guards, and no one is allowed to visit them." Yu Jie hurriedly stopped her. This yard was guarded so tightly that Yu Jie couldn't go there even if she wanted to. "So tightly guarded?" Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows. "Yes, very tightly guarded." Yu Jie nodded. "Is there any way to get in?" "I have no way." Yu Jie shook her head helplessly. She had gone to see them several times before, but there was really no way to do it. "Did mother go to see them?" Qin Wanru thought for a moment and asked. "Madame Shui went to see them once, and when she came back, she was so angry that her face turned pale. After that, she never went there again." Yu Jie had been keeping an eye on Madame D's people, so she didn't count the time when Madame Shui went to see them. "Since mother has seen them, of course, I can also go and see them." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and stood up. "Let's go to see mother first." Seeing that she had made up her mind, the two servant girls didn't persuade her anymore. Qin Yu stayed to clean the room, and Yu Jie accompanied Qin Wanru to Shui Ruolin's yard. Shui Ruolin was resting in the room. Hearing that Qin Wanru came over, she hurriedly asked someone to invite her in. After entering the room, Qin Wanru bowed to Shui Ruolin and asked directly, "Mother, father brought those people here. Are they from your previous family?" Shui Ruolin was stunned for a moment, and her face was a little pale. She hesitated and asked, "How do you know?" "I heard from the two old maids in the mansion that they seem to be the people around Big Sister." Qin Wanru said. Madame D and the people around her were all locked up, but Qin Yuru's punishment was not as severe as Madame D's. Even if she didn't come out herself, the people around her could still go in and out. Hearing this, Shui Ruolin's face turned red, and she was a little angry. "Did they say something bad about me again?" "They didn't say that. They just said that these people are related to mother." "Mother? Can I go and see them?" Qin Wanru said bluntly. What are you going to do? Shui Rulin frowned and said, You are a child, don't worry about those things. I and your father will deal with it. Mother, I'm not old anymore. I will help you solve your problems. These people come from thousands of miles away. Is this really the only thing they can do? Mother, don't you think it's too easy to investigate these people? Qin Wanru reminded her, reached out to pull Shui Rulin's hand, and shook it. Mother, there are some things you can't ask, but I can ask. Shui Rulin was the person involved, and she was remarried. Her former husband's family came after her. It was indeed inconvenient for her to ask some things, but she was worried if she didn't ask, for fear that Qin Huaiyong would ask something. However, Qin Huaiyong was so busy recently that he had no time to deal with these people. On the other hand, he felt that since these people had entered Qin's mansion, they could not escape, so he was not in a hurry. But you are still young. Although she knew that Qin Wanru was suitable, Shui Rulin was still very hesitant. Chapter 257. This courtyard was the most remote place near the back door of the Qin's mansion. There were not many masters in the Qin's mansion, so some courtyards were empty. The two guards guarding the door saw Shui Rulin coming with Qin Wanru and hurried forward to salute respectfully. The general had ordered that apart from him, only Madame Shui was allowed to see the people inside. Are they all right? Shui Rulin asked. Nothing serious. They just went on a hunger strike for a while and scolded others for a while. We have calmed them down now. A guard reported. Can I go in and have a look? Shui Rulin asked politely. Madame Shui can, but second miss. The guard looked at Qin Wanru, who followed Shui Rulin in embarrassment and hesitated for a moment. Did the general say that I am not allowed to go in with second miss? Shui Rulin said softly. The guard shook his head. If I go in alone, I am afraid that they will do something. With second miss around, she can protect me. Shui Rulin reached out to touch her pregnant belly, glanced at Qin Wanru beside her, and said with a gentle smile. Then Madam and second miss, go and come back soon. The two guards looked at each other and then looked at Shui Rulin's belly. After hesitating for a moment, they made way for them. Okay, I will be back as soon as possible. Shui Rulin nodded with a smile and walked inside first. Qin Wanru walked a few steps forward and stopped in front of her. She waved at her and then stepped into the courtyard. Yu Jie followed him closely, leaving Shui Rulin and Qianghua behind. As soon as she entered the courtyard, Qin Wanru saw several people in the courtyard. It turned out to be two women and a man. Several people were standing in the corridor. Seeing Qin Wanru coming in, they didn't recognize her for a moment. However, after Shui Rulin entered the door, the first woman immediately screamed, Shui Rulin, how dare you come here? Shui Rulin's face turned pale. She stopped and didn't go forward. She didn't go forward, but that woman didn't intend to let her go. She rushed over from the corridor, pointed at Shui Rulin and scolded, Shui Rulin, you bitch! You've only been back for a short time, but you can't stand the loneliness anymore. You've hooked up with General Qin and even persuaded him to marry you as his second wife. Look at your own identity, how dare you to be his second wife? Before the woman finished her words, her face was slapped hard. Immediately, a trace of hatred appeared on her face. She angrily turned to Yu Jie, who slapped her and wanted to scold her. However, Yu Jie kicked her ankles. She immediately lost her balance and knelt down with a thud. Where did this little bitch come from? Obviously, this woman was not a person who was willing to suffer losses. Being tormented by Yu Jie, she became more and more noisy. She looked at Qin Wanru beside Yu Jie and scolded loudly. Slap yourself, Qin Wanru said lightly. Yu Jie stretched out her hand and gave him another 2 hard slaps. Little bitch. The woman still refused to stop. Slap again. Yu Jie gave her another 4 slaps. These 4 slaps were so powerful that the corners of the woman's mouth immediately overflowed with blood. However, the force was not small. She opened her mouth and wanted to scold again. However, when she saw Qin Wanru's extremely cold eyes, she shivered and looked frightened. Who are you? The woman stared at Qin Wanru in shock and fear. This is the second miss of our general's mansion. Yu Jie stepped forward, separated the woman's eyes, and said coldly. Second miss, we were caught by Shui Rulin. She was afraid that we would expose her true colors, so she imprisoned us here. Second miss, please save us. The other woman seemed to be smart. Hearing Yu Jie's words, she rushed over and knelt down in front of Qin Wanru with a thud. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the two women in front of her. The previous one looked ordinary, about 30 years old, while the current one looked about 20 years old. She looked delicate, but there was a sense of seduction in her behavior. She did not look like a woman from a good family. "Or you?" Qin Wanru frowned and asked. "I'm her sister-in-law. When I was at home, I also took good care of her. I didn't expect that she would treat me like this now that she is rich." The ordinary-looking woman said loudly and looked at Shui Rulin fiercely. This had nothing to do with the so-called good. "Or you?" Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the woman in front of her. I am." Being glanced at by Qin Wanru's cold eyes, the delicate woman was a little flustered and looked at the previous woman. This is Shui Rulin's ex-husband's concubine. She had been with Shui Rulin before she married. The ordinary-looking woman said loudly. "Slap her." Qin Wanru said coldly. Yu Jie reached out and gave the woman 2 slaps. "Mother, who is this?" Qin Wanru took a step back and looked at Shui Rulin. Shui Rulin was silent for a moment and then said, "Mrs. Lu and concubine Lu." "Sisters?" Qin Wanru's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't show it on her face. "They are cousins." Shui Rulin nodded, with her eyes drifting. "Why did you slap me?" Mrs. Lu was slapped again and again. She was angry and wanted to rush over, but was blocked by Yu Jie. She could only protest loudly and angrily. "Where is this place?" Qin Wanru said coldly. "Ningyuan Army General's mansion. So what?" That was also a place where the law should be followed. Ningyuan Army General and Shui Rulin had hooked up early and even became a couple. How could they do that? After she married into our family, no one said that Shui Rulin could remarry. Mrs. Lu straightened her neck and said, "It was obvious that she used to be arrogant in her family. No wonder Shui Rulin had to come back in the end. With such a sister-in-law, no one could stay here. Since you know it is Ningyuan Army General's mansion, you still dare to slander my father. Do you want to die?" Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said coldly. Although concubine Lu seemed to be cunning, she was timid. Being scared by Qin Wanru, she immediately shivered. The capital city is a place of law. Ningyuan Army General's mansion can't cover the sky with one hand. If we really dare to do anything, someone will seek justice for us. Mrs. Lu was scared by Qin Wanru and looked a little nervous, but she still clenched her teeth and refused to let go. "Someone will seek justice for you?" The capital city is far away from Jiangzhou. Without relatives and acquaintances, who will seek justice for you? Even if you die here, who will know? Many people die in the capital city every day. Have you seen any mansion being sued? Qin Wanru smiled gloomily. Her delicate and beautiful eyebrows immediately made people feel a kind of heart-palpitating cruelty. Mrs. Lu, who was like a shrew, was also scared. She only felt that although the second miss in front of her was young, she inexplicably had a bit of cold majesty and momentum, and even her legs were a little soft. "Tell me, who asked you to come here?" Qin Wanru said. "No one asked us to come here. We came here on our own. We happened to see Shui Rulin. She actually dared to marry again. We are going to build a chastity memorial arch for her." After coming to her senses, Mrs. Lu secretly scolded herself for not living up to expectations. She was actually scared by a little girl. She immediately raised her head and stared at Qin Wanru in front of her, and said loudly. Shui Rulin's face changed dramatically, and her body involuntarily trembled. If this memorial arch was really built, it would be a big matter. Nonsense. When did it happen? Shui Rulin couldn't help saying angrily. "When did it happen? Let me think about it. It happened when you left Jiangzhou. What do you think, Shui Rulin? You didn't expect that we would build a memorial arch for you, right?" Seeing Shui Rulin panic, Mrs. Lu became complacent and more confident. I am not in your place anymore. Why do you want to build a memorial arch? Originally, when I returned home, I said that I was free to marry. But didn't you also take the money from Qin's mansion? Shui Rulin was angry and her face turned pale. When she was taken home by Madame Dowager, the other party did say so. The reason why they let her go so quickly was naturally that Qin Huaiyong used the money to make them agree. Who can testify? Mrs. Lu said shamelessly. Shui Rulin was so angry that her hands also trembled. At that time, it was Nanny Duan who was sent by Madame Dowager to give the money, and the money was directly handed over to Mrs. Lu. How could this kind of thing be heard by others? There would be no witness, and even no contract was left. That was to say, it was fine as long as the other party agreed to let her go. Unexpectedly, now it turned out to be a countercharge. Seeing that Shui Rulin was so angry that she couldn't even say a word, Mrs. Lu became more complacent and more confident. She felt that she had grasped Shui Rulin's weak point. Shui Rulin, now you eat good food and wear good clothes. It seems that you are even pregnant. Don't you think that you are a widow? If a widow remarries, we have to agree, right? We don't even know that you remarry, and we are preparing to build a chastity memorial arch for you. There are old maids doing rough work in the backyard. Call 2 of them here. Seeing that Shui Rulin was so angry that she couldn't say a word, Qin Wanru said to Yujie and glanced at her leisurely with her watery eyes. Miss, there are many old maids doing rough work in the backyard. Why do you call 2 of them here? Yujie immediately understood, nodded, and pretended to be at a loss. Qin Wanru took out a handkerchief to wipe her hands slowly and said, just beat these people to death, so that Madam won't be upset. The capital city is so big, and no one will know that these people died in our backyard. Her voice sounded soft, but the meaning behind the words was extremely bloody. Even because it was said by the petite miss in front of her, it made people feel more and more chilled. Concubine Lu was so scared that she knelt on the ground and trembled all over. You, how dare you? Mrs. Lu was so anxious that she ignored Shui Rulin and looked at Qin Wanru anxiously and said loudly, why don't I dare? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said calmly, aren't you afraid that some of us will expose Shui Rulin? Even if we die, we will let Shui Rulin die with us. Mrs. Lu said fiercely, this is under the rule of the emperor. Even if 100 people like you die, Mother will not be implicated. It is not so easy to enter the mansion. Father asked the guards to keep an eye on you because he wants to kill you. Only I thought that you might not want to die, so I accompanied Mother to come here. But now it seems that you are courting death, so forget it. Qin Wanru said more and more scornfully, glanced at the 2 women, and then looked at the man who was still in the corridor at this time. This man should be the elder brother of Shui Rulin's ex-husband. A couple with a dead brother's concubine. It was very strange. Yujie, find someone to beat these 3 people to death and report that they intended to murder my father. Didn't the mansion punish several assassins in this name before? Qin Wanru said coldly with a cold look in her eyes. After that, she turned around and was about to leave. Chapter 258. Yes, miss. Yujie turned around neatly and walked out without hesitation. Not only the faces of the 2 women surnamed Lu changed greatly, but also the man in the corridor. He rushed to Qin Wanru and bowed respectfully. Miss, please wait. We don't mean to hurt Madame Shui. You don't mean that? Qin Wanru's eyes were cold. Yujie stopped and stood in front of her to protect her. Indeed, we don't mean that. We just came to the capital city for something, but I don't know how to attract the attention of Ningyuan army general. The man braced himself to explain, and he dared not look down on the young second miss in front of him. Qin Wanru looked at the man again. At first glance, he looked like a well-educated scholar, but judging from his behavior just now, he was a very shrewd person. He should be the elder brother of the second young master of Qian's mansion, whom Shui Rulin married. Since you don't mean that, what did your wife mean? Did she provoke our general's mansion? Qin Wanru said lightly. My wife is just a country woman, and she doesn't know some etiquette. When we were in the mansion, she always didn't get along with second sister-in-law, so she said these stupid words. I hope second miss can forgive her. The first young Master Qian looked like a scholar, and his words were also gentle, which made people feel good. He even made people feel that he knew when to advance and when to retreat. My wife is ignorant, and I will teach her when we go back. I hope Second Miss can tell the general that we will choose a day to go back to our hometown after leaving the mansion, and we will not cause any other trouble for second sister-in-law. You are going back to your hometown? Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows slightly. Yes, we are going back to our hometown. We have been in the capital city for so long, and we have to go back eventually. We can't stay in the capital city all the time. The first young Master Qian sighed and said, My mother is still waiting at home, and my second brother is not here. How can I, the only son, not go back all the time? I will go back after the exam. When I came to the capital city, I guessed that I might meet second sister-in-law, so I specially left a letter at home for my mother. What he said was not just soft words. He used both carrot and stick, implying that if the Qin's mansion insisted on keeping them here, they would leave evidence in Jiangzhou. Their parents, who had lost their 2 sons, would definitely try their best to find out the truth for them. You are going to the capital for the Imperial examination? Qin Wanru suddenly said in an unclear manner. The peaceful smile on the first young Master Qian's face froze. He just mentioned it casually, but it was caught by Qin Wanru keenly. He dared not to look down on Qin Wanru anymore. He said seriously, I came to the capital city for the Imperial examination. Since he is going to the capital for the Imperial examination, it is not time yet. He should stay in the capital for a while? Qin Wanru thought of something and her smile became more elegant. An examinee who participated in the Imperial examination was not someone without any scholarly honors. His status was much higher than that of an ordinary commoner. If something really happened to him in the Qin manor, this matter would not be clear. Even Qin Huaiyong would be blamed. Hide in a place for the time being and study peacefully. I will not be involved in the affairs of the Qin's mansion. The first young Master Qian seemed to be a smart person. He immediately understood the meaning of Qin Wanru's words and promised. Hide in a place for the time being and study peacefully. I don't think your wife thinks so. She is bent on finding trouble with my mother, and she will not stop until she is dead. Qin Wanru turned to look at the lady surnamed Lu, who was still kneeling on the ground, and said coldly. Hearing that she was mentioned, the lady surnamed Lu opened her mouth and wanted to say something. However, the first young Master Qian glared at her fiercely. She immediately lowered her head. Although she was very angry, she did not dare to say anything. Although the lady surnamed Lu often made a scene in her mansion, if the first young Master Qian was really angry, she did not dare to act recklessly. My wife is not sensible. I promise that this kind of thing will not happen in the future. I will not let my wife go out at will or talk at will. The first young Master Qian withdrew his gaze and said. Qin Wanru glanced at the lady surnamed Lu coldly and then looked at concubine Lu, who was more delicate at this time. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and said, Since the first young Master Qian came to the capital for the Imperial examination, it is normal to take care of his wife and concubine. But why did you bring your brother's concubine to the capital? Concubine Lu was also kneeling. Different from the shrewdness of the lady surnamed Lu, she looked pitiful and charming. Even if her hair was messy because of what happened just now, she looked more delicate. At this time, one of the buttons at the collar of her clothes was loosened, revealing the snow-white skin inside. Seeing Qin Wanru look at her, she subconsciously leaned toward the feet of the first young Master Qian. My wife is lonely in the capital alone, so she specially takes her cousin sister with her. In the capital, she also has a person to talk to, the first young Master Qian said. He looked very calm, but the corner of his eyes slightly twitched. Qin Wanru's eyes quietly moved from the first young Master Qian to concubine Lu, and finally from concubine Lu to the first young Master Qian. A trace of serenity flashed in her watery eyes. The serenity seemed to penetrate people's hearts, making concubine Lu, who was kneeling on the ground, more and more nervous. She moved her body slightly and got closer to the first young Master Qian. It turns out to be like this. If it is really like this, it is a pity. Qin Wanru said meaningfully. I don't know what you mean, second Miss Qin. The first young Master Qian asked politely. Your brother has died, and the legal wife remarries, but it is not so easy for a concubine to remarry. But in some families, concubines can be given to each other. The first young Master Qian came to the capital for the Imperial examination, so he doesn't know many people. Since he brings this concubine to the capital, I am afraid that he has other ideas. Qin Wanru looked at concubine Lu more and more. These glances made concubine Lu panic and turn pale with fright. She turned to look at the first young Master Qian with a pale face and trembling all over. She looked at the first young Master Qian pitifully and said in a sweet voice, First young master. This voice was extremely gentle and moving in the ears of men, but in the ears of women, it was a little too artificial. The lady surnamed Lu, who was kneeling beside her, looked at concubine Lu confusedly, and all her attention fell on concubine Lu. Second Miss Qin, you think too much. She is my second brother's concubine. How could I do such a thing? The first young Master Qian only felt that his scalp was a little numb. The reputation of the second Miss Qin was actually not prominent in Jiangzhou at that time, but the two families were related, so he knew a little that the second Miss Qin was just a naive miss who didn't understand the affairs of the world. But was the second Miss Qin really just a miss from an aristocratic family who didn't know anything? Why did she give him a feeling of great pressure? These words pierced his heart, and he almost couldn't respond for a while. He had long thought about answering General Qin's words, but he never thought that he would be stumped by a delicate miss from an aristocratic family. It seemed that the secrets in his heart were revealed little by little, and there was a faint cold sweat on his back. This is actually nothing in the capital city. Qin Wanru keenly sensed the stiffness of the first young Master Qian, and a meaningful smile appeared on her lips. Seeing this smile, concubine Lu felt that it was more and more true. She looked at the first young Master Qian with her red eyes pitifully, and her beautiful face was full of begging. She moved her hands a little, as if she wanted to hold the legs of the first young Master Qian, but immediately came to her senses and hurriedly put down her hands. But even so, one of her hands had touched the robe of the first young Master Qian. On the side, the lady surnamed Lu raised her eyebrows. She looked at the face of the first young Master Qian and then looked at concubine Lu, and suddenly became furious. She suddenly turned to concubine Lu and reached out to slap her hard. This slap was so powerful that concubine Lu's body leaned to one side and hit the legs of the first young Master Qian. At this time, she couldn't care about anything else. She hugged the legs of the first young Master Qian and cried sadly. What are you doing? The first young Master Qian looked at the lady surnamed Lu unhappily. What did I do? What did you do? Well, Qian Yukai, you are such a person. The lady surnamed Lu looked back and forth between the first young Master Qian and concubine Lu, and reached out to point at them. She was so angry that she couldn't even say a word. Well, shut up. This is Ningyuan Army General's mansion. If you don't want to die, shut up. The first young Master Qian shouted with a gloomy face. Since you have something to do, let's talk about it next time. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and turned around indifferently. Shui Rulin looked at these people and also turned around with Qin Wanru. They retreated to the outside of the room. The guards made way for them and closed the door again. At this time, the courtyard seemed to be in a mess. There seemed to be a slap and then a woman's cry. Such a coquettish cry was obviously not made by the aggressive lady surnamed Lu, and then there was a man's rebuke. This is... Shui Rulin looked at the courtyard and frowned. Mother, let father handle this matter. Tell father about what happened today. I believe that father will be able to handle the rest of the matter better. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said, Wanru, you shouldn't intervene in this matter. Shui Rulin disagreed. Mother, I just guessed it. Originally, I just came to see what kind of people they are and why they want to deal with you. Grandma said that when you left, the people of Qian's mansion had already said that you can marry at will. How could they say so many words? I didn't expect to see this kind of thing. Qin Wanru smiled sweetly. Well, don't mention this matter in the future. You are a lady from an aristocratic family, and you can't see this kind of thing. Shui Rulin's face darkened, and she scolded Qin Wanru. She didn't like to let Qin Wanru see this kind of thing. As a big brother and his dead brother's concubine, this was originally a kind of scandal. Yes, mother, I won't do it in the future. Qin Wanru nodded obediently. Seeing that Qin Wanru was so obedient, Shui Rulin's eyes turned red. It's all my fault. I actually let you stand up for me. This kind of thing will dirty your eyes. Shui Rulin saw what had happened just now. Thinking that Qin Wanru, such a young girl, had seen such a dirty scandal because of her, Shui Rulin felt ashamed and deeply felt sorry for Qin Wanru. Originally, she just wanted to protect Qin Wanru, but now she had to let this child protect her. How could she not feel sad? Mother, I won't intervene in this matter. Mother, you can tell father yourself. Qin Wanru pulled Shui Rulin's hand and comforted her with a smile. A pair of bright watery eyes were enshrouded with layers of mist, coupled with delicate facial features, which made people feel more pity for her. Shui Rulin secretly made up her mind that she must not involve this child in this matter, and only said that she accidentally saw through this matter. Chapter 259. Shui Rulin also knew that this personal affair could even be said to be a key to control the first young Master Qian. The first young Master Qian wanted to take the Imperial examination and become outstanding. At this time, he couldn't lose a little bit of reputation, and concubine Lu was a key to his reputation. With this handle in hand, the first young Master Qian would definitely not dare to deal with her again, no matter he had a secret agreement with someone or for other reasons. It was not appropriate for a person with an official rank like him to be imprisoned in the general's mansion. If something really happened, Qin Huaiyong would have to bear all the responsibilities. All the scholars in the world gathered in the capital city for the Imperial examination. If something really happened, it would not be the first young Master Qian's fault. After thinking through these key points, Shui Rulin was more and more unwilling to get Qin Wanru involved in this mess caused by herself. After taking Qin Wanru out for a while, she said earnestly, "Wanru, today you came here because of me. I took you to ask about the Qian's mansion, and I also found out what happened later. You don't know anything." Although Shui Rulin knew that this child was smart, she still told her. It would not be good to be involved in this kind of thing. Even if Qin Wanru was only present at that time, some rumors would be spread out, and it would not be good to say it. Shui Rulin tried her best to keep Qin Wanru out of it. "Yes, mother, I will listen to you." Since the goal had been achieved, Qin Wanru would certainly listen to Shui Rulin, and she also knew that Shui Rulin really considered for her. Shui Rulin turned her head to look at the two servant girls behind them. They were both trusted subordinates, and they were close to each other just now, so they heard clearly the conversation between them. Seeing Shui Rulin turn back, the two servant girls hurriedly saluted and knowingly said, "Madam, we will follow your orders. You go back first." Seeing that the two servant girls didn't need her to remind them, Shui Rulin nodded with satisfaction and looked at the intersection ahead. At the intersection ahead, there was a road to Qin Huaiyong's study outside, and the other road was back to the inner court. "Yes, mother." Qin Wanru's eyes also fell on the intersection, and she answered softly. After saluting Shui Rulin, she took Yujia forward a few steps, but suddenly stopped and turned back. Her delicate little face slightly tightened, and she said seriously, "Mother, you are not alone now, you have me and my unborn brother or sister." Her words made Shui Rulin's heart tremble, her nose sour, and she almost shed tears. She bit her lip and nodded hard, but she could not say a word. She knew what Qin Wanru meant. Qin Wanru wanted her to be more careful and think more about herself when necessary. Even though she was originally weak, she was a mother who was tough and could put other things aside for the time being. Qin Wanru didn't need Shui Rulin to say anything. Seeing that Shui Rulin couldn't say anything for a while, Qin Wanru bowed sideways and turned to leave with Yujia. There were some things that she couldn't say, but she was afraid that Shui Rulin would be depressed like in her last life. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Therefore, he had long rung the alarm bell beside Shui Rulin. Looking at Qin Wanru's slender back, Shui Rulin's face became cold. After thinking for a while, she walked out of the study. As a mother, she had to be strong. Now she was a mother and she could not shrink back at all. If she was always so weak, she would need Qin Wanru's weak shoulder to protect her. How could she bear to let such a thin and weak girl? Hearing that Shui Rulin had come over, Qin Huaiyong was stunned for a moment and hurriedly asked the manservant to invite her in. Shui Rulin rarely came to his study. She had only come once or twice since she moved into the mansion. After Shui Rulin came in and bowed to Qin Huaiyong, she went straight to the point and said, "Cousin, how do you want to deal with those people in the backyard? Let's leave it for now and see how it goes." Qin Huaiyong reached out and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. There were too many things to deal with recently, so he had to put those that needed to be dealt with first. How did these people come to the capital? If it was in the past, Shui Rulin would not stop talking when she saw how tired Qin Huaiyong was. But at this moment, she acted as if she did not see it and continued to ask softly. It should be a coincidence that they came to the capital for the Imperial examination. It's not a big deal. Qian Yukai did not dare to do more for his Imperial examination. Qin Huaiyong had investigated it before and felt that it was not a big deal. He would lock them up first. There were too many things to deal with recently. If it was not important, he would put it off. What if it's his wife, the lady surnamed Lu, who wants to make trouble? Shui Rulin looked at Qin Huaiyong and smiled bitterly. "Cousin, it's my fault for getting you into trouble. When we were in Jiangzhou, the lady surnamed Lu was a shrewd person who never wanted to suffer losses. She was the kind of person who was unwilling to suffer any losses even if she made trouble. She might not necessarily take the overall situation into consideration. According to today's situation, the lady surnamed Lu was obviously going to make trouble. The lady surnamed Lu naturally knew Madame D when they were in Jiangzhou. If she wanted to deal with her, it was the best to start with the lady surnamed Lu. Shui Rulin did not know nothing about some things. The lady surnamed Lu was just a woman and a child. Even if she really made trouble, the first young master Qian would not be involved in the end. He only needed to say that she was an ignorant woman and a child to clear up all the things. It would not have a big impact on his Imperial examination. "Rulin, don't worry. I won't let it happen. The lady surnamed Lu is Qian Youcai's wife. If his wife talked nonsense, he would not end well." Seeing Shui Rulin's bitter smile, Qin Huaiyong comforted her. In fact, this was also his real thought. He felt that the lady surnamed Lu and Qian Yukai would not really make trouble. With the Imperial examination ahead of Qian Yukai would certainly manage the lady surnamed Lu well. "Cousin, what if Qian Yukai does not even want his wife?" Shui Rulin asked. "What?" Qin Huaiyong felt that he did not understand Shui Rulin's meaning and asked in surprise. "Just now I went to the yard over there and saw the first young master Qian, the lady surnamed Lu, and concubine Lu. There is obviously something between the first young master Qian and concubine Lu, and the lady surnamed Lu has long been out of the first young master Qian's heart." Shui Rulin thought for a moment and still said what she had seen just now. Of course, the most important person, Qin Wanru, was hidden by her. She put all the blame on herself. "You mean Qian Yukai wants to make trouble and then divorce his wife?" Qin Huaiyong's eyes became strange. The lady surnamed Lu is shrewd and sometimes makes trouble shamelessly. She dares to say anything and do anything. Qian Yukai has not liked her for a long time. In the past, when they were in the mansion, they also made a little trouble every 3 days and a big trouble every 5 days. If Qian Yukai is given a chance to not only end well but also get rid of the lady surnamed Lu, I believe he will be very happy to do so. Shui Rulin analyzed calmly. On the way here, she had already thought about how to say it. She had seen some things in her eyes, but she did not say it just because she did not need to, not because she was not smart. At this time, she was afraid of getting Qin Wanru involved and being plotted against. So she just said what she thought. "You mean that Qian Yukai connived the lady surnamed Lu to make trouble and tell the truth about you? Then he divorced the lady surnamed Lu on the grounds that she was shrewd and rude and married a lady from a noble family?" Qin Huaiyong understood and his face darkened. If this was the case, he really looked down on Qian Yukai. This approach was very beneficial to Chen Yukai. On the one hand, he could get rid of the lady surnamed Lu. On the other hand, he could refute his reputation. If he passed the imperial examination this time, he could marry another lady justifiably. As for the secret benefits, it should be not small. If there was no financial transaction, Qin Huaiyong would not believe it. With Madame D's temperament, there must be a large amount of money involved. At that time, the letters seized at that time were written with the names of these people. At first, Qin Huaiyong did not understand who they were. Later, Qin Wanru's unintentional words reminded him that Shui Rulin had married Madame Qian before. In fact, Madame D did not write the name of Qian Yukai in the letter. She only wrote the first young master Qian, the lady surnamed Lu and concubine Lu, so he did not remember for a while. After being reminded by Qin Wanru, he immediately remembered it was Qian Yukai. Later, he sent someone to secretly invite the three of them into Qin's mansion. At that time, he only thought that Madame D wanted to plot against Shui Rulin with Qian Yukai. After all, they had not done it yet. He did not expect that the agreement should have been made long ago. At that time, Madame D should have asked Madame of Duke Xing to pass a message to let these people make a big deal about Shui Rulin and ruin Shui Rulin's reputation. Qin Huaiyong had thought that Qian Yukai would not really do this for his imperial examination. He did not expect that Qian Yukai had this idea early and wanted to divorce his wife with this matter. Since he and the lady surnamed Lu were not on good terms, he could not take the lady surnamed Lu to the capital city this time. Therefore, this matter should have been settled before Qian Yukai came to the capital city. Unexpectedly, Madame D had been plotting against him early. Qin Huaiyong's face suddenly darkened. He slapped the table so hard that the teacups on the table jumped up. Madame D was really hateful. I know. I will deal with it later. You go back first. Qin Huaiyong suppressed the anger in his heart and said coldly. Shui Rulin grew up with Qin Huaiyong. How could she not know that he was extremely hateful at this time? She stood up, nodded and said softly, Cousin, then I will go back first. Go back first and have a good rest. I will deal with this matter. I will not let you get hurt. Qin Huaiyong looked at her clumsy body with a little guilt and said. He did not consider this matter thoroughly. He did not expect that Qian Yukai would have this idea. He thought that they were husband and wife and would not really do such a thing. He did not expect that Qian Yukai had the idea of marrying another woman before he came to the capital city. It was so hateful. Yes, cousin. I will be careful. I think concubine Lu and Qian Yukai seem to have some. Shui Rulin hesitated and reminded him again. I know. Qin Huaiyong immediately understood that the lady surnamed Lu planned to divorce. Concubine Lu looked more youthful and beautiful. She planned to take her as a concubine. But now the lady surnamed Lu was still here and did not dare to do so openly. But there must be a beginning and an end between them in private. He did not think about this before. He did not think about it for a while. Now that he thought about it carefully, he found that it was indeed a long time ago. Chapter 260. Qin Huaiyong didn't stay in Qian Youcai's yard for a long time. Then he ordered someone to send Qian Yukai and concubine Lu out, leaving the lady surnamed Lu to stay in the mansion. He said that it was Qian Youcai's idea. Recently, he had to study hard and prepare for the imperial examination, so he had no time to consider other things and take care of his family. He said that concubine Lu was a maid who took care of his daily life, and the lady surnamed Lu was sent to Qin's mansion by him. At that time, Qian Yukai didn't make it widely known that he entered the mansion. Many people didn't know who he was, and they didn't know that concubine Lu was not a maid but a concubine of his second brother. Therefore, this reason was really reasonable and everyone believed it. Since it was Qian Youcai's idea and Qin's mansion was willing to help, it was reasonable for the lady surnamed Lu to stay in Qin's mansion. This kind of thing was also a family matter and had nothing to do with others. After leaving the mansion, Qian Yukai returned to his rented yard with a gloomy face. After thinking for a while, he asked the supervisor who stayed in the yard to rent another yard nearby and asked concubine Lu to move there. After this matter was settled, A person came to visit him in the yard. They didn't talk for a long time, and Chen Yukai sent him out. Both of them didn't look very good. It was obvious that they didn't agree with each other. Then the person got on the carriage at the back door. The carriage went all the way back and entered from the back door of Duke Xing's mansion. When the news that Chen Yukai left Qin's mansion with concubine Lu was spread to Qin Wanru, she was carefully checking the Tang Chenyen under the window. It seemed that because of the water and soil, this pot of Tang Chenyen, which had been dull after arriving in the capital, became energetic, but only a little energetic. As for the flower bud, there was no flower bud. According to different species, Tang Chenyen generally bloomed in autumn and winter. However, this pot in Qin Wanru's hand had never produced a flower bud through autumn and winter. It was said that the water and soil were not suitable for it in Jiangzhou, but it was still the same in the capital, which really made Qin Wanru feel helpless. However, this pot of flower was asked by Chu Luqian to raise. If she didn't raise it well, he might not stop when he remembered it. Qin Wanru was also helpless about this. "Miss, why did the general send the first young master Qian and concubine Lu away and leave the lady surnamed Lu alone?" Qin Yu asked confusedly after reporting the matter. She took the small watering pot from Qin Wanru's hand and carefully watered the flowers for her. Qin Wanru washed her hands in the basin brought by the little servant girl, and then picked up a handkerchief to wipe her hands. Then she said slowly, "With the lady surnamed Lu in our hands, Chen Yukai can't do anything even if he wants to. After all, the lady surnamed Lu has not reached the condition of being divorced. So now with the lady surnamed Lu in our hands, we can still deter Chen Yukai." "Then why did you let concubine Lu out?" Qin Yu put down the small watering can and asked when she saw that the water was almost used up. It was unjustifiable for concubine Lu to live with the first young master Qian. Even if there were other servants to serve them, they could be regarded as a man and a woman living alone together. Moreover, she was the concubine of his dead brother. It was very attractive for them to live together. Chen Yukai is a smart man. He won't let concubine Lu live with him. He still needs to take the Imperial examination. At this time, he can't ruin his reputation. But concubine Lu, I'm afraid she doesn't think so. She is just a concubine whose husband is dead. What will happen to her in the future depends on Qian Youcai's words. If Chen Yukai really gives her away, what can she do? Qin Wanru said slowly, with a sneer on her lips. It should be Chen Yukai who had a real deal with Madame D. On the surface, it was the lady surnamed Lu. If the lady surnamed Lu made a big deal out of it, Shui Ruolan's reputation would be ruined and she would suffer a loss. Then Chen Yukai could divorce his wife because of this. Others would even think that he was wronged and the lady surnamed Lu was a shrew. Who could be blamed for her ending like this? At that time, Shui Ruolan's reputation would be ruined, the lady surnamed Lu would be divorced, and the money given by Madame D would fall into Qian Youcai's hands. It could be said that it was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Now that the matter was found out by her father, who had always been decisive and cruel, he directly kept the lady surnamed Lu but sent concubine Lu to Chen Yukai. He wanted to control the matter between concubine Lu and Chen Yukai, forcing Chen Yukai not to dare to say anything against the Qin's mansion. Since concubine Lu went out with Chen Yukai, even if Chen Yukai wanted to avoid arousing suspicion with her, concubine Lu, who was afraid that she would have no one to rely on in the future, had to cling tightly to Chen Yukai. Originally, there was an ambiguous relationship between them. Even if Chen Yukai expressed to avoid arousing suspicion at this time, it was probably impossible. "Miss, if the general doesn't release first young master Qian, what will happen?" Yu Jie asked, paying attention to another aspect. "Madame of Duke Xing must have already found him. If my father doesn't release him, I'm afraid that another trouble will come to us. After all, Chen Yukai is an examinee. Although his status is not prominent, there are a large number of examinees in the capital city. If he dies out of sympathy, it may lead to a big trouble." Qin Wanru said with her long eyelashes hanging down, covering the deepness in her eyes. Scholars had always been a group, and it was the group that was most likely to become officials. If they were really instigated by others, the small Qin's mansion might not be able to resist. Madame of Duke Xing not only wanted her life, but also wanted to destroy the whole Qin's mansion. She wanted to destroy herself from the root. The hatred was deep, but it also made Qin Wanru feel that her guess was correct, but she couldn't find the evidence. However, since Madame D's letter and Qin Yuru's map were found on the old maid beside her, Madame Dowager and Qin Huaiyong could no longer believe that Madame of Duke Xing was kind to the Qin's mansion. No matter how hypocritically Madame of Duke Xing showed kindness, Qin Wanru didn't have to worry that Madame Dowager and her father would agree with her relationship with Madame of Duke Xing. When the two servant girls heard Qin Wanru's words, their faces changed greatly. They didn't have much experience, but if all the officials of the Imperial examination in the capital city knew about it, it would be difficult. Even the first-class officials in the capital city had to avoid the sharp edge temporarily when facing this kind of thing, not to mention that the foundation of Qin's mansion was not stable and its rank was not high. Madame D is so vicious. She wants to destroy the whole Qin's mansion. Yu Jie murmured. She doesn't want to. She is just used by others. She thinks she just wants to deal with my mother. Qin Wanru sneered. Madame D was vicious and short-sighted, so she became a sharp arrow in the hands of Madame of Duke Xing. Then why doesn't General go to Madame D? Qin Yu asked confusedly. My father has been so disappointed with her that he doesn't know what to say. But because of Duke Yong's mansion he can't really do anything to her, so he simply locks her up and doesn't come out. Qin Wanru analyzed lightly. She really doesn't come out? That's great. Yu Jie was a little dissatisfied at first, but she suddenly became happy after thinking about it. If Madame D was not a demon in the mansion would be much more peaceful. Although the first miss would also make some trouble, she was not as good as Madame D. Moreover, first miss could not protect herself now and had been grounded. Second miss, someone from Duke Yong's mansion asks to see you. When the three of them were talking, a servant girl's voice suddenly came from the yard to report. Qin Wanru frowned and didn't know why Duke Yong's mansion sent someone to see her at this time. She nodded slightly, sat down on the chair in the middle, picked up the tea and took a sip, and then put it down. Yu Jie stood behind Qin Wanru, and Qin Yu lifted the curtain. Looking at a strange old maid and two servant girls in the yard with their heads down, she said, "Come in." The old maid came in with a smile and left the two servant girls outside the yard. She came in and bowed to Qin Wanru first, then smiled sincerely and said, "Second miss, I am an old maid from Duke Yong's mansion. I heard that our madam is sick. Old madam and madam are worried, so they specially sent two servant girls who know some medical skills to serve her. Madame D was locked up, so she couldn't really say that. Being sick was the best reason. Shouldn't you tell my father and mother about this?" Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked calmly. She really didn't understand what Duke Yong's mansion meant. "I've shown them to the general just now. The general thinks they are good, but he still wants to ask Madame Shui's opinion. I think it's not convenient for Madame Shui recently, so I came here to show them to Second Mississippi. If Second Miss thinks they are suitable, I'll send these two servant girls to Madame Shui." The old maid was good at talking. In a few words, she made an unreasonable thing reasonable. Since Qin Huaiyong had agreed, how could Qin Wanru, as his daughter, dare not to say no? Moreover, Duke Yong's mansion was so humble, which could really make people feel good. After thinking for a while, Qin Wanru said lightly, "What do I need to do?" "Second miss, you don't need to do anything. I've done what I should do. I just need to let Second miss have a look and then tell our son-in-law." The old maid said with a smile on her face and was very kind. This attitude was quite different from when Duke Yong's mansion sent people to Qin's mansion for the first time in the capital city. Qin's mansion was in trouble, and Duke Yong's mansion was also in trouble. Qin Yuru had a bad reputation, so did Di Yen. No one dared to say anything about this marriage in the teeth of the storm. "I don't care about this. You'd better go to see my mother." Qin Wanru frowned. She couldn't care about what happened in Madame D's room. "But Madame Shui's health. I'm afraid that I will disturb her rest." The old maid of Duke Yong's mansion said awkwardly. Duke Yong's mansion naturally knew that Shui Ruolin was pregnant. What she said was very reasonable. Everything was based on taking care of Shui Rulin. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the old maid's smiling face, which seemed to be very calm. Would people of Duke Yong's mansion treat Shui Rulin well? For this point, Qin Wanru absolutely didn't believe it. But I can't care about this kind of thing. What should I do? Qin Wanru withdrew her eyes and smiled slightly. She asked calmly, if I tell my father after this, it will seem that I meddle in the affairs of my father and Madame D. How can I do such a thing as a daughter? Even if she just told her father after this, it was not something that a daughter should do. Therefore, this matter was basically just a formality. As a madam of an aristocratic family, it was impossible that Countess Yong didn't know it. Chapter 261. The old maid's words were reasonable. Although Qin Wanru couldn't meddle in the affairs of Madame D's yard, she knew about it. She just needed to send someone to accompany her to Shui Rulin and tell her. Since she had seen it, Shui Rulin would record it, so Shui Rulin didn't need to worry about it. Qin Wanru could even directly instruct the supervisor of the inner court to deal with this matter, and then Qin Wanru could tell Shui Rulin that this matter would be handled by Shui Rulin. Qin's mansion and Duke Yong's mansion were close, and they were related by marriage. It was reasonable for Qin Wanru to do so. You go by yourselves. You should know my mother. Qin Wanru didn't answer the old maid's question, but said after thinking for a while. When the masters of Qin's mansion didn't enter the mansion, the servants of Duke Yong's mansion also came to help from time to time, so they were familiar with some important courtyards. Seeing that no one led the way when the old maid came in, Qin Wanru knew that she knew the way. Will it be too troublesome for Madame Shui? Seeing Qin Wanru refuse, the old maid became uneasy, and the smile on her face was much less. My mother is in charge of this matter. There is nothing wrong with it. Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and said unhurriedly, This is our aunt. I'm afraid that Madame Shui will have a grudge. The old maid looked at Qin Wanru eagerly and said, Of course. She hoped that Qin Wanru could take over this matter and let someone take them there. She just needed to report to Shui Rulin, and there was no need for Shui Rulin to see them often. Madame D and Shui Rulin were both Qin Huaiyong's wives, and the relationship between them was not so harmonious. As the servants of Duke Yong's mansion, it was reasonable for them to be afraid that Shui Rulin would embarrass them. This seemed even more reasonable. Qin Wanru suddenly showed a smile and looked at the old maid below with a faint smile. Where are the two servant girls? Bring them in and let me have a look. She didn't say that she didn't care about it, nor did she say that she must care about it. She just said such a sentence. Although the old maid was stunned for a moment, she immediately nodded and said, Okay, I'll bring them in right away. I didn't come in just now because I was afraid that they would be rude and frighten. Second Mississippi, Duke Yong's mansion was also an aristocratic family, but the servant girls from Duke Yong's mansion were afraid that they would break the rules when they met outsiders, so they didn't allow them to greet them. This reason was really far-fetched. Although the old maid still looked calm and didn't hesitate to turn around and go out to call for help, this reason was not as reasonable as just now. Yujia took 2 steps forward and wanted to go out to have a look, but she saw Qin Wanru shake her head silently and stopped immediately. Qin Yu, who was standing at the door, was not so particular. She lifted the curtain and looked outside. The old maid said a few words to the 2 servant girls who lowered their heads. The 2 servant girls nodded and followed her. After entering the room, they first bowed to Qin Wanru respectfully, and then stood aside in a well-behaved manner, looking down at their noses and mouths in a well-behaved manner. His etiquette and upbringing were not bad. Ordinary servant girls couldn't afford such etiquette and upbringing. How could they say that they were afraid of not following the rules? The rules of Duke Yong's mansion were really strict. Raise your head. Qin Wanru's eyes flashed with a trace of sarcasm. Her eyes fell on the 2 well-behaved servant girls, and she said lightly, Raise your head and let Second Miss see. From now on, Second Miss is your master. The old maid said to the 2 servant girls with a smile. The 2 servant girls answered and raised their heads together. Seeing the face of one of the 2 servant girls, Qin Wanru's smile deepened, but there was only coldness in her eyes, and only the coldness overflowed little by little. It turned out to be her. No wonder Duke Yong's mansion sent her to Qin Wanru first and let her take responsibility for this matter. They wanted to push the blame to Qin Wanru if anything happened in the future. The two servant girls were 16 or 17 years old. They were very beautiful but not frivolous. They even had the feeling that they were from a good family. Although they raised their heads, they behaved themselves and didn't look around. The light green coats of the servant girls of Duke Yong's mansion made their faces as white as snow and their skin was crystal clear. These are the two servant girls that Duke Yong's mansion will give to Madame D. What can they do? Qin Wanru looked them up and down and said with a smile. Yes, they are given to Madame D by our mansion. These two servant girls can massage. Our madam is ill and can't move much. Let these two servant girls massage her for a while, which can relax her and prevent her from being sick all the time. Our old madam specially found these two servant girls and then trained them in etiquette. The old maid introduced them with a smile. Speaking of old madam of Duke Yong's mansion, she naturally used her to suppress Qin Wanru. Compared with Qin Wanru, she was a real elder. Qin Wanru certainly couldn't refuse the servant girls sent by her. Good massage? Can you help me massage a few times? I also have a headache recently. I don't know if it's because I came to the capital city. I don't accept it. Qin Wanru reached out to press her head and slightly closed her watery eyes. Okay, let one of them serve second miss first. The old maid repeatedly agreed. It seemed that she was not baffled by Qin Wanru's sudden difficulties at all. She nodded to a servant girl. The servant girl stepped forward and bowed to Qin Wanru. Then she turned to the back of Qin Wanru. Yu Jie leaned to the side, but did not step aside. The servant girl came over, reached out to press the acupoints on both sides of Qin Wanru's forehead, and gently rubbed them. Qin Wanru herself was good at acupuncture, so she immediately knew that this servant girl really had some skills. She just moved a little and pinched the acupoints very steadily and accurately. Her strength was also not small. At first glance, she knew that she really knew how to do it. Yu Jie's eyes also fell on the servant girl's hands. Yu Jie, who knew medical skills, could see clearly that this servant girl's hands were also very neat and skillful. She was really good. Second miss, what do you think? The old maid, who had been standing aside with a smile, asked with a smile at this time. Not bad. Qin Wanru nodded, slowly opened her eyes, and waved her hand. The servant girl stepped back silently, and then went back to the previous position. She still stood there with her head down, which was very good. Second miss, you mean? The old maid said with a smile. I mean, Nanny, you can go to my mother. As a daughter, I don't have to intervene in this kind of thing. Qin Wanru said with a faint smile. But the old maid was stunned for a moment. She did not expect that after such a big trouble, Qin Wanru still did not agree to take over this matter. Then why did she do that just now? I'm also tired here. You can leave. Qin Wanru leaned back, waved her hand, and directly asked them to leave. But the old maid was anxious and wanted to say something, but was pushed out of the door by Yu Jie. The two servant girls left inside looked at each other, and then peeked at Qin Wanru in panic and hurried out. At the door, Yu Jie's face darkened. This kind of thing is originally not our Mrs. Business. If you think it is not appropriate, you can directly go to our Madame Dowager or Madame Shui. But didn't second miss deliberately test them just now? The old maid had a chance to finish her words at this time. Just now, second miss did want to help you, but now second miss is tired. You can go by yourself. Yu Jie waved her hand impatiently and said. He was clearly toying with them. The old maid's face turned blue with anger, but she also knew that this was not Duke Yong's mansion. She gritted her teeth, looked at the people around her, endured it, and helplessly left with the two servant girls. Qin Yu politely sent the old maid to the door, and then turned back to give a hint to Yu Jie. She followed the old maid. Just now, Qin Wanru had told her to see where the old maid was going next. Yu Jie turned back and returned to the room. She saw Qin Wanru sitting on the chair in a daze. Miss? Yu Jie called in a low voice. Qin Wanru seemed not to hear it, and her eyes still fell straight on a floor tile in front of her. There was a bit of coldness in her eyes, and her pink little face was gloomy without a trace of a smile. She seemed to be a completely different person from the softness and gentleness just now. "Miss," Yujie said anxiously, afraid that something bad would happen to her. This time, Qin Wanru heard it. Her eyes were dark and deep. She slowly raised her head and looked at Yujie. "Has the old maid left?" "Yes, and Qin Yu followed her." "Miss, is there anything wrong with the old maid?" Yujie answered while peeking at Qin Wanru's expression. She found that although Qin Wanru's eyes were deep, her expression had returned to normal. She couldn't help but feel relieved. "It is very wrong. She is not an old maid, but a servant girl," Qin Wanru said with a sneer on her lips. She had seen the servant girl who stood there and looked well-behaved. In the last life, she was the servant girl sent by Duke Yong's mansion to Madame D, and then she was sent to Qin Huaiyong by Madame D. It was this servant girl who looked well-behaved and like a girl from a good family who took away Shui Rulin's favor, which made Qin Huaiyong treat Shui Rulin coldly. In the end, Shui Rulin died with 2 children. The main reason was this servant girl who colluded with Madame D. She seemed to be pure and kind, but she was cunning. Duke Yong's mansion specially sent her here to help Madame D deal with Shui Rulin and her, and this servant girl did do it. She would never forget the scene when this servant girl deliberately covered her stomach and fell backward, framing her for pushing her. At that time, 2 rough old maids who were protecting her rushed over and pushed her away fiercely. She hit the corner of the pavilion, and her blood dyed the pillar beside her red. It was Shui Rulin who came over after hearing the news and hurriedly asked someone to save her. Otherwise, she would have died that time. Later, this servant girl actually made a false accusation, saying that Shui Rulin colluded with her to harm her child and deliberately plotted against her, and that it was just an accident that she almost died. Therefore, this matter was turned into a small matter, and then into nothing. In the end, nothing happened except that she lay in bed alone for half a year. Shui Rulin's health became worse because of this, and she was even more neglected by Qin Huaiyong. Later, she died with 2 children. Speaking of this servant girl pushed her a lot. Now, it seemed that it was a lifetime ago, but the scenes were still in front of her. The smile on her lips was no longer sarcastic, but cold. Very good, Duke Yong's mansion was unwilling to see Madame D fall, so they sent this woman here again. Chapter 262. Qin Wanru knew clearly what Duke Yong's mansion was planning when she saw the servant girl. Then she thought that they sent the servant girl to her place first and let her take over this matter after checking it was to send the servant girl to Qin Huaiyong as a foreshadowing. In the future, this servant girl would inevitably harm her grandmother, mother, and herself. At that time, others would only laugh at her for what she had done. They might also say that this servant girl was originally sent to her father's side by her. If anything happened, she would be blamed on her, and it had nothing to do with Duke Yong's mansion or Madame D. Her heart was indeed vicious. "Miss, what should we do? This servant girl will be sent to Madame D." Yujie's face changed dramatically. "Let them send her first. Since she is here, let's take things as they come." A faint smile appeared on Qin Wanru's red lips. She wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine. A man from a good family who knew the rules and manners was much better than a woman who lost her reputation and was still arrogant and domineering. In this life, from the root, she was no longer the timid girl, and Shui Rulin was no longer a concubine who could only helplessly protect her. A concubine and a concubine fought for favor, and the favored won one. But a wife and a concubine fought for favor, and it was not certain who would win. Moreover, she had a better countermeasure here. The old maid came out of Qin Wanru's courtyard and helplessly looked at Jifeng Pavilion. She also knew that she couldn't go back. This second Miss Qin was stubborn, and she did whatever she wanted and did whatever she wanted. Fortunately, Madame also expected this situation and told her to go directly to Madame Shui if there was no other way and enter Qin's mansion according to the rules. With the 2 servant girls, the old maid went to Shui Rulin's Lu Feng courtyard. As expected, she was stopped at the door again. After asking carefully for a while, she was allowed to go in. As for the 2 servant girls, they still stayed outside the door. After asking about the situation, Shui Rulin asked the supervisor to register them. One was called Huang Rui, and the other was called Hongya. They were sent to Madame D to take care of her. Since Duke Yong's mansion didn't say anything about the rumor that Madame D was ill, everyone took it as true. It was not a big deal to send 2 servant girls here. Given Madame D's current situation, it was almost impossible for her to make a comeback. Shui Rulin didn't need to spend any more energy to deal with her, but Duke Yong's mansion still needed to maintain politeness on the surface. In this regard, Duke Yong's mansion and Qin's mansion now had the same goal. In this case, Shui Rulin did not make things difficult for the old maid of Duke Yong's mansion. After writing down the names of the 2 servant girls, she let them go. After that, the old maid took the 2 servant girls to see Madame D. Because Qin Huaiyong had sent someone to tell her before, the old maid easily took the 2 servant girls into Madame D's Yulon pavilion. Hearing that they were from Duke Yong's mansion, Nanny Zhou went to the door to welcome them. After leaving the 2 servant girls outside, the old maid followed Nanny Zhou into the room. After pushing the door open and entering, the room was filled with thick gloom, as if the window hadn't been opened for a long time. It made people feel stuffy, as if there was a disgusting smell in it, which was very nauseating. Although the old maid felt uncomfortable, she didn't dare to show it on her face. When they entered the inner room, they saw Madame D lying on the bed, leaning against the wall. The old maid was shocked. She hadn't seen her for a long time, but Madame D's face was sallow and she seemed to be terminally ill. Was she really sick? Madame, are you really sick? The old maid said in shock. Sick? If I stay in this place for a long time, I will get sick even if I don't. Madame D's face was very gloomy. The curtains of the window were almost all drawn down. There was not a trace of wind coming in, and even the light was half gray. Madame D's face seemed to be covered with a layer of ash, without a trace of vitality. Only a pair of gloomy eyes showed a kind of heart-palpitating coldness under the dim light. Old Madame asked me to find a way to see you, and also sent you 2 servant girls to take care of you. Old Madame asked you to rest assured that she would find a way to get you out. She asked you not to worry. As long as there is life, there is hope. The old maid comforted her, knowing that it was difficult for her to get rid of the knot in her heart at this time. If she stayed like this, she would really get sick. There are a lot of servants in my yard, but they can't get out. There are a lot of idle people. She asked my mother not to send them here. If she really misses me, she would find a way to let Qin Huaiyong out. Madame D's voice became sharp. If I stay in this courtyard, I will not only get sick, but also go crazy. As she said, she stretched out her hand from the quilt, pulled the corner of the quilt with her sharp nails, and sneered nervously. Oh, don't worry, madam. Old Madam will find a way. Don't worry. The old maid didn't dare to disobey her and could only follow her words. After that, she looked at Nanny Zhou beside her, and Nanny Zhou nodded silently, indicating that she should talk to Madame D like this. Hearing the old maid's words, Madame D seemed to calm down a little. Although she still looked gloomy, she looked a little relaxed. Unexpectedly, she asked about the servant girls. Why did she send me 2 servant girls? My mother would not send 2 servant girls for no reason. These 2 servant girls are really not ordinary. They were specially sent to you. The old maid lowered her voice and said, What do you mean? Madame D rolled her eyes and asked, 2 servant girls. One of them is very good at massaging, so old Madame sent her to serve you and massage you. The other one is sent to the son-in-law. The old maid rolled her eyes and said meaningfully, Sent to Qin Huaiyong? Are there not enough servants serving him now? Why did they send to him? Madame D said with jealousy and hatred. These words reminded her of Shui Rulin, and she gritted her teeth for a moment. In her view, everything she had suffered in front of her was Shui Rulin's trick. Thinking of Shui Rulin, she wished that Shui Rulin could die in front of her now. Madam, old Madame said that the person serving the son-in-law now is not you, so why do you care how many servants he has now? This one was specially sent to me, and the contract of selling her is in your hands. Even if she becomes the son-in-law's servant, so what? She has to listen to you obediently, and she can also fight with Madame Shui," the old maid said in a sincere and heartfelt tone. Her words made Madame D silent for a while. She grabbed the quilt fiercely, and 2 lines were immediately scratched out of the exquisite embroidery on the quilt. Her face was gloomy. Seeing that Madame D still didn't let go, the old maid continued to persuade her, "Madam, why don't you understand? As long as this servant girl is favored, your problem can be easily solved. As long as she is around the son-in-law, you can be released, can't you? And Madame Shui is pregnant. If the son-in-law ignores her at this time, do you think she will be so angry that she will have a miscarriage? Abort the child in her belly." Madame D didn't speak for a long time, and then said with a sneer, "Yes, we have to find a way to make her unable to give birth to the child, or when she gives birth, both of them will die. Think about it. If she is upset at this time and finds out that the son-in-law is good to other women, will she be in a bad mood and annoyed? At that time, we can play some tricks, and this child will definitely not be born," the old maid said with a smile. Madame D liked to hear these words. She leaned back and didn't have the neurotic coldness just now, but looked a little ferocious. "I want the lives of the 2 bitches, Shui Rulin and Qin Wanru. Of course, I will listen to everything you say. But now things have not succeeded, and I still need to bear with it. I must not let the other side find out the plot of the young lady and old madam. After a period of time, when Madame Shui falls out of favor or miscarriage, of course, it's best to die with both of them. The Qin's mansion will be my world again. As for the second miss, without Madame Shui, everything depends on you," the old maid said. Madame D showed a little complacent smile on her face. Of course, the ending in this sentence was what she liked most. But then she stopped smiling and said, "Mother, how can you be sure that the girl will definitely be liked by Qin Huaiyong? Do you want to have a look, madam?" the old maid said with a smile. Madame D nodded. The old maid turned around and went out. After a while, she brought in a servant girl. When the servant girl came in, she respectfully bowed to Madame D, and then stood aside. She looked very decent and polite. After standing aside, she didn't look around. "Daughter of a good family?" Madame D looked up and down and asked. The old maid looked at the servant girl with a smile. The servant girl came forward and lowered her head to answer, "Madam, I am not a daughter of a good family. I am a prostitute redeemed by old madam." The so-called prostitute was a prostitute who had never received guests. Although she did not receive guests, she knew everything and had many ways to serve people. A prostitute who grew up to be a daughter of a good family? Madame D frowned and looked up and down at the servant girl in front of her. She didn't look like a prostitute who came from a prostitute's house. "I have been redeemed by old madam for several years. Old madam has been sending people to teach me. Everything I say and do is taught by old madam." The servant girl's face was not charming at all. Her behavior looked even more kind. Only when she slightly raised her eyes, there was a pair of bright eyes with a bit of mellow tenderness. She was just gentle and charming, without any trace of prostitution. She was a little shy and wanted to speak in a sweet voice. Madame D was very satisfied with this. She and Qin Huaiyong had been married for many years. Of course, she knew that Qin Huaiyong did not like that kind of prostitute. In the past, she also mentioned that the prostitute was too charming. When in Jiangzhou, Qin Huaiyong had always been very clean and never went to the brothel. He had always had a good impression of the brothel. However, the servant girl in front of her looked like a daughter of a good family, but she was soft and charming in her bones. Qin Huaiyong would definitely like her. After all, Shui Rulin was old. How could she compare with this servant girl? Well, let her stay here. Madame D was very satisfied, but suddenly she thought of one thing. Mother prepared her so many years ago. Who did she prepare it for? The old maid waved her hand, and the servant girl left respectfully, behaving appropriately. Seeing that she retreated out of the room, the old maid lowered her voice and said, "Madam, don't ask more about this. This servant girl was not originally prepared for you, but old madam really couldn't bear to see you suffer like this, so she chose one of them." Chapter 263. Madam, you don't have to worry about it. Old Madam asked you not to tell anyone. You can't interfere in this kind of thing. The old maid lowered her voice and said cautiously. After saying that, she looked at Nanny Zhou beside her. Nanny Zhou was a smart person and said immediately, Madam, don't worry. I won't tell anyone. Madame D thought for a while and didn't ask any more questions. How can I send them there? He doesn't let my servants go out at all and won't come here. He is helping Shui Rulin, that bitch. Madame D turned her attention back and said with hatred. She pulled the embroidery thread on the corner of the quilt fiercely with a ferocious look. Don't worry, madam. These 2 servant girls are sent by our mansion to take care of you. Old Madam said that you can't go out, so our mansion will send people to visit you from time to time. Every time they visit you, they will send someone to report to the son-in-law. Since these 2 servant girls are sent by our mansion, they can go out and report to the son-in-law occasionally. I will send one of them to talk to him later. The old maid said meaningfully. Okay, let's do that. Madame D gritted her teeth. Madam, it is said that you are sick. You are sick now, aren't you? You have to call a doctor to have a look and adjust the medicine. You can't afford to waste your health like this. The old maid continued. Yes, Madam has been in poor health these days, and we really need to find a doctor to treat her. It is also good to adjust the medicine. I don't know if old Madam has a good doctor to recommend. Nanny Zhou understood tacitly and immediately said, There is an excellent doctor at the corner of your front street. It is also close to your mansion. You can go there to see a doctor. The old maid said with a smile. Okay, I will tell the general about it later. Nanny Zhou nodded repeatedly. You'd better not tell him about it. You're now locked up like me. How can you go out casually? The old maid said. What should I do? Nanny Zhou spread out her hands and said anxiously. Now there are 2 servant girls outside, right? Moreover, they're here to help me recuperate. Aren't their words more accurate than yours? That's right. Today, I will act as a guide and help these 2 servant girls lead the way. Next time, it will be very natural for them to reply. The old maid smiled. Her words made Madame D and Nanny Zhou nod repeatedly. Since the matter was settled, the old maid was about to leave, but Madame D stopped her. Can you go and see Yuru? I don't know how she is now. Madame D said worriedly. Since Mei Shui came to take her letter to Madame of Duke Xing that day, there had been no news from her until now. Madame D felt faintly uneasy. The first miss is also grounded now. It's reasonable for me to see you, but it's unreasonable for me to see the first Mississippi. What's more, we can't make the general angry because of the 2 servant girls. The old maid advised. It was not that he could not go to see Qin Yuru, but he was afraid that this reason was not good enough to make Qin Huaiyong angry, and then the loss outweighed the gain. Is there any trouble outside about Qin Yuru? Madame D thought for a while and stopped asking about Qin Yuru. She started to inquire about the news outside. There were fewer people in her yard, and those who stayed were all locked up. Now she could not even send a message in. She didn't know whether Madame of Duke Xing immediately dealt with Shui Rulin after getting her letter that day. She had an agreement with Qian Yukai. She instigated the lady surnamed Lu to deal with Shui Rulin, make the trouble of Shui Rulin infinitely uncontrollable, and ruin Shui Rulin's reputation. After that, she had nothing to do with the lady surnamed Lu. Of course, she was a useless chess piece. Originally, the real deal with her was Qian Yukai. For this reason, she had transferred a sum of money to Qian Yukai in private. I haven't heard anything about Madame Shui outside. What's the matter, madam? The old maid didn't understand Madame D's words, but she also heard the meaning in her words. She immediately asked in surprise. Nothing. I heard that someone wants to reveal everything about Shui Rulin. Madame D didn't want all her things to be known by an old maid, so she said vaguely. Madame wants to use Madame Shui's reputation to deal with her? To reveal Madame Shui's past? The old maid asked in confusion. Shui Rulin is just a widow. She needs the consent of her former husband's family before she remarries. If they have built a chastity memorial arch for her, how can she get married? What's more, she has a child. If this matter gets serious, this bitch will be finished. Since the old maid said so, Madame D couldn't suppress her anger for a while. Madam, you can't. The old maid's face changed dramatically. Why not? That bitch dares to snatch the position of my legal wife and actually forces me to this point. I want her to die, and she will die miserably. That evil creature also can't have a good life. I want Shui Rulin, the bitch, to be condemned by everyone. Madame D said with a gloomy face. Her long nails scratched the quilt fiercely a few times. Madam, this is not appropriate. If it really comes to this point, what will happen to the son-in-law? You are not only alone now, but also cousin Mississippi. If the son-in-law does something wrong, she will not have a good life, and Duke Yong's mansion will also be implicated. The old maid was anxious and said repeatedly, if the marriage of Duke Yong's mansion was not solved, to some extent, Qin's mansion and Duke Yong's mansion were one. How does Shui Rulin's matter have anything to do with Qin Huaiyong? Madame D said angrily and confusedly. Madam, you are confused. How can this matter not affect the foundation? Madame Shui's matter is not her own matter. If the son-in-law did not marry her, how could this happen? This kind of chastity memorial arch has to go through the imperial court, which is not the matter of a woman in the inner courtyard. She may even be accused of deceiving the emperor, which is a serious crime that can result in the execution of 9 generations of the emperor. The old maid was so anxious that cold sweat came down from her forehead. Then what should we do? Madame D also panicked. She had never expected such a result. Madame of Duke Xing did not say so at that time. But compared with Madame of Duke Xing, she was more willing to believe her mother. Madam, this matter has not been exposed yet, has it? The old maid calmed down after thinking for a few times. Not yet. Since you have not heard any rumors about that bitch, it has not been exposed yet. Madame D said uncertainly. She was still selfish in her heart, so she did not tell the whole thing. She just hinted to Nanny Zhou beside her and asked her to shut up. Nanny Zhou was also very panicked. Originally, she really wanted to tell the cause of the matter. But after being glared at by Madame D, she immediately shut up. Madam, please write a letter. I will help you take it to the person in charge. Ask him not to act rashly. After going back, ask old Madam to monitor him. It's better to suppress this kind of thing. Otherwise, the son-in-law and Madame Shui will not be well off, nor will Madame and cousin Miss. The old maid persuaded. But I am not reconciled. Thinking that Shui Rulin could now take care of the fetus peacefully, while she was locked up, the venom in Madame D's eyes almost overflowed. Madam, don't worry. Now with old Madame's method, you can take charge of Qin's mansion again in a few days. The old maid said, Okay, I will get up and write a letter. Although Madame D's hatred was hard to dissipate, she also knew that the old maid was right. She sat up from the bed with the help of Nanny Zhou, walked to the desk in front of the window, picked up a pen and wrote a few words. Then she put the pen into an envelope and handed it to the old maid. She then told an address and asked the old maid to send the letter to the first young Master Qian. The old maid took it carefully, nodded repeatedly, and was about to leave. But she was stopped by Madame D. Since you are my mother's servant, you should naturally know that my original dowry shops are left in the capital city. After so many years of income, you should ask my mother to give me some money. I have been locked up here, so I need to spend a lot of money. Spending a lot of money to buy more people, Madame D felt that she needed more money now. Madam, you need money? The old maid did not expect that Madame D would suddenly ask this and looked very surprised. Of course I need money. I'm locked up, and I can't even send a message out. It's all because I can't use the money properly. So I want the income of these years. I'll ask my mother to send the money to me secretly. Madame D said. I will go back and ask old Madame. The old maid said vaguely and did not dare to agree directly. Okay, remember to bring money next time you come. Madame D did not find the old maid's strange expression and waved her hand. Madam, then I will go back. I will also take the 2 servant girls outside and let them report to the son-in-law. The old maid said. Madame D went back to the bed and leaned against it. She slightly closed her eyes and waved her hand. The old maid left and stood at the door thoughtfully looking at Madame D inside the door. Then she turned and left. When she came to the yard, The two servant girls were still standing there obediently. Seeing her come out, they hurriedly bowed to her. The old maid said something in a low voice, and the two servant girls followed her out of the yard. Seeing that they were all from Duke Yong's mansion, the old maid guarding the door would certainly not stop them and directly let them go. "Madam, do you think?" Nanny Zhou slightly lifted the curtain and said hesitantly after seeing the old maid leave with the servant girls. "What's the matter?" Madame D asked. "When Madame mentioned money just now, she didn't seem to promise you anything at all." Nanny Zhou said. Just now she stood beside the old maid without saying a word, but it did not prevent her from hearing and seeing clearly. Since the madam mentioned the money, the old maid's face became a little unnatural. Could it be that mother won't give me the money? When I got married, mother specially added those dowry shops for me. She was afraid that I would be wronged in Qin's mansion in the future. Now that I need it, mother will naturally give me money. Madame D did not believe that old Madame of Duke Yong would embezzle her money. "Madam, it is not old Madame who is in charge of Duke Yong's mansion now," Nanny Zhou hinted. Hearing her words, Madame D was silent for a moment. Now she was extremely displeased with Countess Yong and felt that all these troubles were caused by her. If she had readily agreed to marry Di Yen and Qin Yuru at that time, all these things would not have happened. "Humph, how dare she embezzle my money?" Madame D snorted coldly. "Madam, you must be vigilant. You can't take it lightly. In this world, there are many people who turn against each other because of money." Moreover, the old maid's reaction just now was a little strange. She was so eloquent before, but in the end she didn't even say anything. Nanny Zhou said. Chapter 264. "Madam, when First Miss comes over next time, please find a chance to let First Miss visit those shops outside. You haven't had time to visit them since you came to the capital city for such a long time. Just go there and ask. If everything is good, Madam can rest assured." Nanny Zhou thought for a while and said, "Okay, I will listen to you." Madame D nodded and agreed. Compared with others, Madame D trusted Qin Yuru more. The old maid took the two servant girls to Qin Huayong's study. When she arrived at the door of the study, she saw a servant girl standing at the door in addition to the servant. The old maid had a good memory. She remembered that this servant girl was the servant girl she saw at second Miss Qin's place. "Little brother, please tell them that I am the supervisor old maid of Duke Yong's mansion. I sent two servant girls to serve Madame D. Now I have to go back. I want to ask the general for mercy. Can you send some medicinal materials here occasionally and let these two servant girls check them?" Since there was a reason to report. Now that Madame D was locked up, it was inconvenient for Shui Ruolin to intervene in Madame D's affairs. Therefore, the most important person to report was Qin Huayong. A logical reason to let the servant girls see Qin Huayong was established. "You haven't gone back yet?" Before the servant said anything, Yujia looked up and down at the old maid and asked in surprise. "Not yet. I am going back and want to tell the general about it." The old maid said with a smile. "That's it? Okay, I will report it for you later. Now our miss is discussing something with the general. It's better not to disturb them." Yujia waved her hand and said. The servant who was going to go in stopped. This we have to tell the general." The old maid didn't intend to leave like this. This matter was different from the previous ones. She couldn't let Qin Wanru directly take responsibility. Forget it. If it really disturbs the general, who can bear the responsibility? Yujia said coldly with her face darkening. But the old maid still wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Yujia impatiently. Okay, it's really not a big deal. Our miss will promise you." Then she turned her head and whispered to the servant, as if the old maid and the two servant girls didn't exist. The old maid was ignored and her face turned pale. She was the real henchman of old Madame Yong and dealt with some secret affairs. Even Madame D didn't know her, so she was very shrewd. After her face changed, she calmed down. There was even a hint of a smile on her face. "Since Second Miss has taken on this matter, that's fine. There's one more thing that I'd like to trouble Second Miss with. When this servant went to see Great Aunt just now, I found that Great Aunt's illness was very serious. Is it possible for the manor to change a doctor for her and choose a new doctor with excellent medical skills? Madame D was not sick at all. She was just locked up, but everyone said that she was sick. Since she was sick, she would naturally invite a doctor. For the sake of everyone's face, the old maid only said that they would change a doctor, but did not mention that there was no doctor before. Is Madame D really seriously ill? Yujia looked surprised as if she didn't expect this. Yes, our aunt is really seriously ill. I'm afraid that the medicine she used before is not right, so we want to invite another doctor to cure our aunt first. Our Madame Dowager only has one daughter, so she is very distressed. If something really happens to her, how can our Madame Dowager live? The old maid looked sad and wiped her tears with a handkerchief, as if Madame D was really dying now. Her words also meant that if something really happened to Madame D, old Madame would never tolerate it. Yujia didn't know what to say. She could refuse an old maid's request, but she couldn't really suppress Madame D. After all, Madame D was the Madame of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Even if she was locked up, she could only say that she was sick to the public. Just you wait, Yujia said. Thank you, miss. The old maid showed a trace of complacency on her face, but her tone became more polite. Yujia turned and went into the room to report. In the room, Qin Wanru was holding a painting for Qin Huaiyong to appreciate. Among the rows of bamboos, an elegant scholar was playing the zither, and another man with a high hat and a broad belt was standing aside and appreciating. The whole painting had a kind of Wei Jin style, which was what Qin Huaiyong appreciated most. Father, can you see that this is an authentic work? Qin Wanru carefully identified it and said helplessly. Let me see it again. Qin Huaiyong looked more carefully. He gently rubbed a corner of the paper in his hand, looked at a seal on it, and carefully identified it. The room suddenly became quiet, and the sound of Qin Huaiyong rubbing the paper could almost be heard. When it was quiet, Yujia came in. General, second miss, people from Duke Yong's mansion are here to say goodbye. After saluting respectfully, Yujia reported in a well-behaved manner. Got it. Qin Huaiyong waved his hand without raising his head. Yujia hesitated for a moment, but still reported. People from Duke Yong's mansion said that Madame D is ill, and asked General to find a doctor to treat Madame D. They said that old Madame of their mansion is very worried about Madame D. Although Yujia's words had been very tactful, Qin Huaiyong still heard a little threat, so he snorted and said, just say that I got it, and I will find a doctor for her. Let old Madame rest assured and enjoy her life. Yes, I will go back now, but there is one more thing. Yujia's voice became low and she said timidly. What is it? Say it. Qin Huaiyong became more and more unhappy. He didn't want to hear more about Madame D. Madame D was brainless, and it was better for her to stay in the room and not come out, in case she messed up things again. It is said that Duke Yong's mansion will send some medicinal materials here in the future, and the two servant girls today will check and accept them, Yujia said. Okay, I got it. They can accept the medicinal materials sent by Duke Yong's mansion in the future, and they don't need to report to me anymore. Unexpectedly, it was such a trivial matter again. Qin Huaiyong became more and more impatient, waved his hand and said, just say that I got it, and let them leave. Yes, General. Yujia took a few steps back, turned around and went out of the room. Outside the room, an old maid stood there with a kind look and was talking with a servant. When she saw Yujia coming out, she hurriedly went forward with a smile and asked, Miss, what did the son-in-law say? Our general said that he got it, and he will find another doctor for Madame D. As for the medicinal materials sent by your mansion, just let them check and accept them, and they don't need to report this kind of thing to disturb the general's rest in the future. Yujia repeated Qin Huaiyong's words to the old maid. The old maid was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect that Qin Huaiyong would ask someone to pass such a message, and she couldn't keep the smile on her face. She sneered and said, the medicinal materials sent by our mansion are sent to your mansion. After the servant girls check and accept them, they have to report to the son-in-law. How can they do it alone? Some medicinal materials are good, and they can't be put into the warehouse randomly. Do you mean that you want the general to check and put them into the warehouse personally? Yujia sneered and asked. Her question was very impolite. The old maid forced a smile and said, How can it be? I just need to report to the son-in-law. Well, you can go back. You don't need to report anything in the future. It's just some medicinal materials. If you don't trust them, don't bring them here. These 2 servant girls are also from your mansion, right? If you can't trust the servant girls sent by your mansion, what else can you do? Yujia sneered coldly. Why don't I go in and talk to the general again? The old maid looked behind her and tried to sound her out, unwilling to give up. Yujia took a step forward and stood in front of her. The general has already decided on this matter. It doesn't matter if you say it again. At this moment, the general and our miss are discussing business. How can they have time to care about such a trivial matter? Nanny, you'd better go back first. If something is really lost in our mansion, we will solve it by ourselves. We won't find Duke Yong's mansion. This was a direct order to drive her away. The old maid helplessly looked at the slightly closed door behind Yujia and could only go back. She walked to the side and whispered a few words to the 2 servant girls. It seemed that she was telling them what they should pay attention to. As she spoke, she looked at the door expectantly. However, when she finished speaking, no one came out of the door. After she finished speaking, the 2 servant girls nodded and retreated to the side. At this time, the old maid had adjusted herself. She smiled and bowed to Yujia and the servant. Then she left, leaving the 2 servant girls behind. Yujia looked at the 2 servant girls and ignored them. She went into the room to serve the old maid. She just came to the door to stop the old maid. She knew that the old maid would not give up and would definitely find Qin Huaiyong again. She walked behind Qin Wanru and stood still. She winked at Qin Wanru, stretched out 2 fingers to make a gesture outside, and then put 2 fingers down to make a posture of standing there. Qin Wanru immediately understood. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes became deep. She even let the 2 servant girls stay. She was determined to see her father. In the last life, she did not know when the servant girl named Huang Rui met Qin Huaiyong. But when she knew, Huang Rui had been promoted to be a concubine, and she was the most favored one. On the surface, this servant girl looked as gentle as a good girl, but in fact, she was kind but vicious. However, Qin Huaiyong liked her very much and was obedient to her. Such a woman would never be as simple as she showed, not to mention that she had such a background. If it were not an accident, Qin Wanru would not know that this concubine Ray actually came from a brothel in the last life. She was a prostitute in a brothel. However, she did not have any coquettish behavior, but looked very gentle. In this life, she would not give this woman a chance to get close to Qin Huaiyong. Father, I leave this painting with you first. You can tell me after you appraise it. I suddenly remember what my mother told me before. I have to go back first. With her watery eyes turning, she had an idea in her mind. She pushed away the paper in her hand and said softly with a smile. Chapter 265. Qin Wanru came out of the room and saw 2 servant girls standing in the yard. After standing for so long, the 2 servant girls were still very well behaved and stood motionless on the side. Qin Wanru walked over. Yujia rolled her eyes and hurried to follow her. Are you the servant girls sent by Duke Yong's mansion? Qin Wanru looked at the 2 servant girls up and down and finally fixed her eyes on the face of one of them. Both of them were very beautiful, but one of them was more beautiful and looked more like the daughter of a good family. Generally, the pretty girl from a humble family outside the mansion looked like this. With snow-white skin and a pair of beautiful eyes, she looked a little charming. With a slender waist, she just stood there and looked delicate and charming. What are your names? I'm Hongya. I'm Huang Rui. Hearing the question, the 2 servant girls hurried to return the salute respectfully. Their expressions were very gentle, which really made people have a good impression on them. What are you still doing here? Qin Wanru's face darkened. The 2 servant girls looked at each other. Huang Rui took 2 steps forward and said, Second miss, we are afraid that the general will ask us if we stay here. Father has nothing to do. You can go back. Qin Wanru waved her hand and said, "Miss, Nanny just told us to wait here." Huang Rui glanced at Qin Wanru timidly and said, "She looked very pitiful." If someone didn't know it, he might think that the person standing in front of her was bullying her. However, it was Qin Wanru standing in front of her. Qin Wanru's watery eyes were clear and watery. She looked very pure, with a gentle smile and jade-like skin. Even if she just smiled, it made people feel that the girl in front of her had excellent temperament and was graceful. How could she be the kind of person who would bully others? "You look so aggrieved. Are you deliberately making people think that our miss bullies you? Our miss just cares about you and asks a few more questions. What's wrong with you?" Yujie was not happy and said coldly on the side, "I didn't." Huang Rui was so flustered that she was about to cry. Her eyes were slightly red and she looked more pitiful. If a man in front of her saw her, he would probably pity her again. Qin Wanru glanced at the servant girl calmly with a trace of disgust in her eyes. This Huang Rui was very good at pretending. It was not a big deal, but she acted as if she had done something to her. She looked soft and weak on the surface, but in fact she was extremely vicious in her heart. In her previous life, she had often displayed this kind of innocent and weak appearance in front of her father. That time, when he almost died in her hands, she had displayed an extremely weak and terrified expression. She had directly thrown herself into his father's arms and had even fainted in his arms. "Since you didn't go, father doesn't want to see you," Wanru said coldly. "Second miss, I'm afraid that the general will ask about Duke Yong's mansion." Huang Rui still refused to leave. Before she came here, she told her many times that she must find a way to see Qin Huaiyong and find a way to make Qin Huaiyong fall in love with her. How could she leave at this time? Slap him in the face. Qin Wanru's face turned cold when he didn't leave. Yu Jie understood. She stepped forward and slapped Huang Rui hard. Huang Rui's delicate face immediately became red and swollen. "Second miss, why do you—" Huang Rui's tears fell down. She knelt down with a plop and cried miserably. "You are now a servant girl of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Don't always talk about Duke Yong's mansion. Now you need to serve Madame D, which has nothing to do with me. I don't want to know how you serve her. You just need to serve Madame D well. You don't need to come to see me." Qin Wanru's smile was bright and beautiful, but also extremely cold. "Second miss." Hongye, who was with Huang Rui, also panicked. She hurriedly knelt beside Huang Rui with a plop sound and whispered, "When you arrive at Ningyuan Army General's mansion, you should know that your master is the master of Ningyuan Army General. You should forget everything in the past and don't think about something irrelevant. If someone asks you to do something, don't pay attention to it. Here, there is only one master. If you have two masters in your heart, the result will not be good." A sharp dark light flashed in Qin Wanru's eyes. She said in a low and slow voice. Her clear watery eyes could almost reflect people's minds. "Yes, second miss, we will leave right away." Hongye was timid. She answered in a hurry, trembling. After saying that, she pulled Huang Rui, who was still unwilling to leave, and hurriedly left. "Miss, what do these two servant girls want to do?" Yu Jie pointed at the two servant girls who left in a hurry and asked in confusion. "I don't know if Duke Yong's mansion wants to do something again. Otherwise, how could they let these two servant girls come to see father again and again?" Qin Wanru frowned slightly and muttered to herself with a little doubt. "Miss, I know. Are these two servants sent by Duke Yong's mansion to the general?" Yu Jie's eyes lit up. She seemed to think of something and lowered her voice. But this voice was just heard by the servant who stretched his ears to listen to them. "Don't talk nonsense. Let's go." Qin Wanru spat at Yu Jie and said, "Yes, miss, I am talking nonsense." Yu Jie hurriedly begged for mercy. The two of them walked to the gate of the courtyard, talking and laughing. Behind them, the manservant who was guarding outside rolled his eyes a few times, turned around, and went into the room to report. Qin Wanru walked to the gate of the courtyard and turned to the side. Taking advantage of the turning space, she looked at the position of the servant at the door of the room. As expected, the servant was gone. She could not help but have a touch of faint deepness in her eyes. Her father seemed to be very wary of everyone. When she came here today, he didn't say a word about her family background, as if he didn't care about all the rumors about her family background outside. He really behaved like a biological father. But Qin Wanru clearly knew that he was not. She sighed deeply. For a moment, she had mixed feelings and couldn't tell what kind of feeling she had. Miss, this time the servant girl named Huang Rui didn't see the general. What about the next time? Yu Jia lowered her voice and said, the slap just now was not light. Even if this girl wanted to do something, she would be embarrassed these days. But what about the next time? If this servant girl deliberately approached the general, it was really hard to say. When will Child D come? Qin Wanru didn't answer Yu Jia's topic. Her eyes flickered slightly and she asked ambiguously. Things happened one after another in Qin's mansion, and even Duke Yong's mansion was involved. Di Yen also returned to his Duke Yong's mansion before. At that time, it should be Duke Yong's mansion that wanted to cancel the engagement. But since Duke Yong came to the mansion, Di Yen lived in Qin's mansion from time to time. Even if Qin Yuru was grounded now, he would still go to see her. The relationship between them seemed to be peaceful. As long as Di Yen was in the mansion, he would go to see Qin Yuru. This attitude was not intimate, but not intimate either. I will go to inquire about Child D in a while. When mentioning Di Yen, Yu Jia immediately understood and nodded at once. This child was now with First Miss because he had no choice. No matter how she looked at it, he was not very willing. From the looks of it, his reputation had become like this, and the young miss had to bear a large part of the responsibility. As for why he still went to see First Miss now, it should be because he had no choice. And the biggest characteristic of this child was that he was soft-hearted. He couldn't bear to see women in tears, delicate and helpless, in Qin Huayong's study. The servant was clearly telling him what he had seen just now, from what the old maid of Duke Yong's mansion said after entering the door, and what Qin Wanru said and did when she went out to Yu Jia. Qin Huayong put down the picture scroll in his hand, and his eyes immediately became gloomy. He narrowed his eyes and said slowly after a while, "Don't let these two servant girls come to my study. Drive them away immediately when you see them." No matter what kind of idea Duke Yong's mansion had now, he was not willing to spoil things because of a servant girl. Qin Huayong had experienced many things. From the conversation between Qin Wanru and the two servant girls, he immediately knew that these two servant girls had other intentions. These two servant girls from Duke Yong's mansion had originally made him feel uneasy. "General, do you want to lock them up as well?" The servant suggested. All the people in Madame D's courtyard had been locked up. Even if these two servant girls were locked up as well, in the servant's opinion, it was also reasonable. "No, let's see what they want to do." Qin Huayong snorted coldly. Now he also hated Duke Yong's mansion very much. If it were not for the fact that Qin Yuru had no one to marry and could only marry Di Yen, he would also not want this marriage. "Yes, General, then Second Miss." The servant was about to leave, but he stopped. "Second Miss is still young, just keep an eye on her." Qin Huayong looked down and refocused his attention on the picture scroll in front of him, and said ambiguously, "Yes, General." The servant retreated, and the room immediately became quiet. However, Qin Huayong pushed the picture scroll in front of him, and his eyes fell on the air in front of him. He frowned tightly, as if there was something very difficult to solve that had not been solved yet. Qin Wanru did not expect that she would get a bag of Tang Chinyan flower seeds when she did not raise it well. It was said that it was a very beautiful bag of seeds. Holding the bag of seeds that was said to be Tang Chinyan seeds, Qin Wanru asked Nanny Yu in astonishment. "Second Miss, it is said that the unengaged young ladies of the families of officials above the 4th level in the capital city will each have a bag of flower seeds." Nanny Yu had just gone out to inquire about it, and now she received the news to report to Qin Wanru. "Do I have to plant this?" Qin Wanru looked at the small bag of seeds in her hand and felt very helpless. She really did not know whether she could plant it or not. The pot that she had raised was considered a finished product, but it did not really look like it had really grown until now. Yes, it was said that when the time comes, there will be a flower appreciation party, and whoever grows the most beautiful flowers will be greatly rewarded. Nanny, you said. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.